Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm not sure how many folks we have online, but it's a very exciting event for us. We're doing a joint partnership with NEST and Accenture, and we put together some training that'll hopefully help you all that are logged on, excel in what you're trying to do, right? Which is grow a business in order to help your local communities, which we really, really value. I want to just clarify, we're not trying to teach you guys how to be entrepreneurs, but I feel like we have some points or suggestions that can really help you grow your businesses. So first off, we have a presentation. The topic is a human resources topic, and it's geared towards helping you guys figure out how to hire the best people and how to develop the best people. As entrepreneurs, you take a lot of risk in bringing people onto your businesses, and it's very key that you identify the right people and are able to grow them to help you grow your businesses. So thank you so much for joining. I'm going to hand it off to our first presenter, her name is Samira. She's one of our HR experts, and she'll walk you through the first segment. And Natalie, I don't know if you want to say anything, a few words, or to kick it off, but Natalie Figueroa is also here from NEST, along with Loic. And I don't know if you have any words you want to say.
Yeah, hello everyone. We're so excited to have our teams in NEST Peru. They're broadcasting the office. Hi to everyone in Peru, in Brazil, all across Latin America. We're really excited to have you. We know you're very passionate leaders who are seeking to make your community stronger through entrepreneurship, and we're really excited to work together to make this sector stronger. So let's get this started.
Yep, and just a quick some instructions. We have a few people here in the room from Accenture and NEST, and we've asked them to go ahead and help us by reading the questions that come through the chat. Feel free to, as you think of a question, just please type it into the YouTube chat room, and our folks that we have here in the room will capture those questions, raise their hand, and try to ask your questions so they can get answered in real time. So for our volunteers here at Accenture, thank you for joining us. We're really excited about this partnership, and you guys can really help by just, like I said, reviewing the questions that come through the YouTube chat room. Just raise your hand and interrupt. We want to make this very interactive so we can so they can get the most out of it. So thank you very much, and I'm going to introduce Samira.
Hi everyone, I'm Samira. Nice to meet you all virtually. We're going to talk about hiring and managing people today. So with our first slide, discover, inspire, grow exceptional people. So keep those in mind when we think about our people. Is the click working?
Yeah,
I'm trying to go to the next
sorry.
slide. No worries.
We're just trying to switch to the next screen. Give me 1 second. All right. Can everyone see the screen?
Right
I just
now.
want to make sure.
Hello everyone.
Okay. Sorry, give me 1 moment. They don't see the presentation. We're trying to help see the presentation.
Okay, great. Let's go to our first slide. Just talking about Accenture briefly. So we have 400,000 people at Accenture. We have who are in 40 different industries in 120 different countries. We help our clients with helping them to solve problems within consulting, strategy, digital, technology, and operations. We partner with over 3 out of 4 of Fortunate Global 500 companies driving innovation to improve the way the world works and lives. Our revenue is 32.9 million. When we think about our people, you need to think about the environment, what's happening, the trends, and our current environment requires us to really focus on the following elements. One is organizations are complex already. We need to make our technology and processes more simple to be more successful. Work is interconnected. Collaboration is very important, not competition. So you want to communicate that through your culture every day at work. Employees, especially the millennials, want real-time feedback. And I will get into real-time feedback later in this presentation more deeply. Our work is increasingly digital, so we need to be uniquely human. What do we mean by uniquely human? Bringing your real self to work every day. That means being yourself, being unique, and that's how our teams are stronger, by this diversity, by this uniqueness. Flexibility is the key. One size does not fit all. We're all different, with different strengths, with different backgrounds, and the importance is to understand these differences and realize that one recipe does not fit all when you're dealing with your team and your people. Next slide, we have a quotation from Ellen Shook, our Chief Leadership of Human Resource Officer at Accenture. Our vision is to improve the way the world works and lives. To do this, we need to improve the way your people work and live. Productivity and wellness science shows this is an exercise. So we're going to make it more interactive. So I'm going to get your input for these sections. So when you think about your people, there are 4 elements that come into play: body, mind, heart, and soul. So for the body, the physical and energized. So getting less than 6 hours sleep. Anyone in this room gets less than 6 hours of sleep? I see a lot of hands. More than almost half. No surprise. Research suggests an average of less than 6 hours of sleep is equivalent of being legally intoxicated. I'm sorry, guys. So when you think about that, it means you need to make sure that your people have work-life balance. When you think about success in a long term, you need to definitely create an environment where people have more life-work balance, get rest, and they don't burn out. For the mind and being mentally focused, finding your attention span has decreased with the advent of new technology. So share some numbers. What do you think is your attention span? How many seconds, how many minutes? I don't know if anybody's typing in the chat box.
What was the question again?
Attention span. What do you think is your attention span?
Probably 20 minutes.
20 minutes, good for you. Wow, that's pretty long. Any other number?
30 seconds.
Mine is less than that. Do we get any numbers through the chat? Anyone's sharing?
20 minutes.
20
Depends on
minutes.
the topic.
That's true, definitely. So research has shown that our attention span is shrinking from 12 seconds to 8.25 seconds. Has an attention span of 9 seconds. So when you think about that, it's very important to be able to engage your people with realizing that they have short attention span, especially the millennium generation. So next one is heart, sense of belonging. Again, very important. Have you ever left a job because you didn't feel that you trust your leader? Yes.
Javier on the phone, on the chat. Javier on the phone. says 15 to 30 minutes.
15 to 30 minutes.
And
Pretty long.
We got Renata who says it's hard to say.
That is true, definitely. Depends on the topic, but overall, all of us, our attention span is actually decreasing because of the technology, because of so many channels we're exposed to every second during our day, during our work, during our personal life. So next one would be the heart, sense of belonging. Have you ever left a job because you didn't trust those people around you? I'm sure if it didn't happen to you directly, you know someone probably that it has happened to them. So trust is very important when you think about recruiting and bringing your people on from the day one. Research has shown a study of more than 1,000 leaders have been in this study. 59% of them indicated that they left the company because they had trust issues. So building that trust from day one, again, is very important and crucial. So, sense of purpose. Have you ever worked on a project and wondered why you're doing that? Anyone? Exactly. A lot of us. I'm sure it happens to most of us. So sense of purpose is very important. Studies showed that meaningful work is consistently considered among the most important features of work. So you need to communicate the sense of purpose for all the projects that you're doing with your team all the time. I will briefly go through this slide. Candidates are at the center of everything we do at recruiting. So from the first point of contact that the candidates have with the company, the first experience to the last experience counts. So making that journey as seamless as possible is very important. So at Accenture, we personalize the outreach. We digitalize the recruiting, and we do high-touch onboarding. I'll give you one example for our recruiting. For example, when we hire our analysts, bringing them on board, we have recruiters who work one-on-one with our analysts to understand more about their interests, about their strengths, about their background, to recommend them where is the best fit within Accenture. So it's very personalized. So I highly recommend, in the process of recruitment, make it personalized. Really get to know the person that you want to bring on board, build that relationship, and then see where the fit is. I think I missed the quote. So yeah, we create highly personalized relationship with candidates to help them visualize a long-term career with Accenture. Be the place that people want to work for.
Hang on, we got Linda who has a problem.
Sure.
On the screen. We're good now. Okay,
awesome.
Move on. Yeah.
So be the place that people want to work for. Build your company with mission and vision. Communicate your mission and vision. Make sure your mission and vision excites people. Make them want to work for you. Hire your fans. What do you mean by that? People who take ownership of your business. You cannot succeed as a one-man job. You need a team who actually take ownership, who act like owners every day. Start building your brand from day one. So people want to work and be associated with a lot of time people go and work for a company because they want to be associated with that brand. So you definitely need to communicate and build that brand from the beginning to attract talent. Hold on to your existing talent. People want to work with talented people. So once you have the talented people, keep them so you can bring on more talent to your company. Offer challenging opportunities. Talk about your company using different social channels. Have a blog. Share your learned experiences. Share relevant sites. People who are interested in those topics, read them, and then if they might join your company and contact you. Speak at different events. Network all the time with people. It's very important. The secret formula for creating a great company culture is not the boards on the wall. And I cannot emphasize more on this. Every day. It's what your employees feel and say about working at your organization. what to look for when you are hiring and interviewing people. You can always train people to do something. Values that you cannot teach them, you cannot train them, so you really need to look into those when you are bringing people on board. Positivity, transparency, self-awareness, confidence, flexibility.
Okay.
Sure. Should be sure. Is it coming? Okay. My apologies. I was just saying that one of the things I love working about this company is they allow us the freedom to explore our talents and our passions. So I think them being able to give their employees some freedom is key to keeping people happy. Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's so true. Is anyone typing anything in the chat box?
We were lost. So we're having a discussion about the ideal workplace. What are your opinions on the ideal workplace for you?
So some of the topics we discussed, I don't know if you guys heard us, is passion, the openness of the freedom, the openness to be able to do outside of your job description is very important. Empowering people to bring all their qualities, all their skills to work. I don't know if anybody else is typing about what is their ideal work environment.
Yeah,
We can move to
when you
next.
think about the ideal workplace or your ideal job, what kind of things come to mind? What kind of people do you like to work with, or maybe if you guys can just type some comments, we can address those.
A place where I share the same vision and mission, very important. I agree with you. People that you work with, the managers, what qualities do you want them to have? I myself like to work for someone who is transparent, who is honest, who is direct. Anything else from the team? Who do you want to work for?
Someone inspiring.
Someone who inspires you. Anyone else?
Someone who is willing to experiment and try something that has not been tried before.
Great.
Honest.
Leader.
Perfect.
I think someone else that lets you fail. Because sometimes, you're going to fail in some projects, and allow you to get back up and recover and keep moving. Yeah.
I guess it goes back to your point of letting you try different things.
Yeah.
Until you don't do that, you're not gonna. And I see it like it's an experience and doing it better next time. Exactly. Transparency, honesty, high ethics, moral, all great points. What makes you passionate about your work? Again, is something to think about. So all these things are things to think about when if you want to work for someone who's a great leader, you want to be that great leader. If you want to work for an organization who wants to give you a healthy work-life balance, then you want to be that organization. So think about all those great things that you want to be, or like the people that you want to work for. You want to be that leader yourself and build that organization yourself. So look at someone rather than something. The people should be at the center of your focus.
Renata on the phone, on the YouTube live, she says, same values, honest and transparency.
Great.
Right? And we've got Linda who says smart, leader, honest.
Great, thank you. We're trying to go to the next slide. Sorry, I'm having issues.
1 second.
Thank you. So the next topic is about, I mentioned briefly how important it is to give instant feedback, real-time feedback. So still some companies give feedback once a year. Performance review once a year. Manager sits with their employee and tell them how good and bad they did. It doesn't work. It's not effective. We need to have continuous feedback. For that, you need to have clear goal setting with your people. You need to have clear expectations, specific expectations. Real-time, meaningful conversations. Focus on people's strengths. That's very important. Encourage asking for feedback. Not only you give them the feedback, you want them to know that they should also ask for feedback as an ongoing process.
I have a quick question. You mentioned making meaningful feedback based on their strengths. Is that what you said?
Yes, definitely. You also want to look at the areas of improvement. That's something that we all always want to improve, but you want to turn the focus on people's strength, know their strengths, and make their strength to grow. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Make it inclusive and personal also. The most important branding for your company is your people's experience, from onboarding to recruiting and onwards. Lastly, I want to talk about inclusion and diversity. It's very important when you're doing your recruiting to consider inclusion and diversity. Hire a diverse team. It makes you stronger. It makes you smarter and makes you succeed. Again, I mentioned briefly, bring your real self to work every day. That's something we want to encourage. Yes, exactly. I agree. Dezo shared that giving structured feedback, or is he asking me, is structured feedback or free feedback? It really depends on the case. At some point, you might need to give some more structured feedback, but when the feedback is instant and ongoing, not much structure needed. Because, for example, I deliver something, I do something, right on the same day, you tell me, Samira, I think you should do it this way. So you don't need like a feedback plan for that. You can just have the conversation, sit with your employee face to face, and have that open discussion. Does that help, Dezo?
Yeah, I think
Awesome.
maybe the question is also geared around like how frequent, maybe weekly, monthly.
I would say every day.
Every day.
Every day. If you're working with someone and then you feel like they need to improve in an area, or they send an email that they can send a better email, they did something that they can improve, give it right. Give it in, you want to give feedback in private, but you want to do it the same day. Yeah. And I understand sometimes it's harder because people are busy, but I think it's very important to take the time to actually consider it like a everyday type of feedback. So, sorry, back to inclusion and diversity. I would like to share like what we do at Accenture. So we have different employee groups at Accenture, LGTB, Hispanic groups, African American, Asia Pacific, women's group, people with disability, parents, wellness. You don't have to be African American to be part of African American employee group. And when you look at our groups, our ERGs, that's the case. We have diverse people within those different employee groups. The purpose of that is to bring the community together, build a stronger culture, learn about different cultures, also network, also leverage each other's strengths, and we have different networking events, different social events. We also do volunteers through these organizations to give back to the community and all that.
You want to talk about the benefits of having this kind of diverse people in a team?
For sure, yeah, definitely. So when you think about diversity, why is it strengthening people? Because people with different backgrounds bring new things on the table. So I might not be exposed to something, but because of your background, you can teach me something, and that's amazing, and that's what makes us stronger. Anybody else like to share? Please.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I have seen when you have a diverse team.
You come up here to the microphone.
One interesting thing that I have seen that really makes it different is when you have diverse people. When you have a team with diversity, right? Everybody thinks differently, and when you are brainstorming for a solution or a new idea, especially in the environment that all the entrepreneurs are, you would get fantastic, very diverse opinions and ways to meet any particular objective or a goal. So then you can pick what is the best, and that will have complete aspect taken care of, which is what are the challenges I may face. That you will have people who are very negative about one particular aspect. They will tell you in what scenarios it will fail, so you are prepared for that. There will be people who would be very optimistic and they would say, this is the sky level we can reach. So that's the difference. So you know where I can go, what are the pitfalls, and that is going to help you create a perfect plan.
That's
something.
Thank you so much for sharing. Anybody else likes to share through the chat box their thoughts on this, on inclusion and diversity?
Yeah, this is Roberto from Accenture. So I have led the Hispanic ERG in the past, and I think one of the things that ERGs represent is an acceptance, right? Accept, and in the U.S. we have a very wide range of diversity. But in other countries, like in Mexico, I'm from Mexico, in Latin America, diversity may mean something different. Maybe different social classes, different areas of the city, different racial characteristics.
Exactly. Disability.
Or disabilities.
Different.
And it's important that a employee feels accepted. Wherever they come from, whatever class system, whatever. It's important that they feel accepted and comfortable in their space. So I think, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Awesome. Any questions for me before we move to the next section of our presentation? My colleague Aparna is going to talk about managing people. If it's no questions, I'll just pass it to Aparna. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey everybody, this is Aparna here, and I'm a part of the HR team too. And we're just going to be talking about the next steps from recruiting. So you get somebody on board. Of course, that's the first step in the entire employee journey, and it doesn't stop there. What you need to then do is to make sure that you're having and keeping people engaged, tracking their performance, having continuous learning programs, just so that everybody in the team continues to grow and you grow as an organization and an enterprise too. To that effect, I have a small story to share with you all, and it's something I think that best explains how managing people works and how we as leaders have a huge impact on our people. So the story is about an elephant and a rope, and if you've already heard this before, I'll just ask you to be shush on the forum here, not to let out what the conclusion says, but here's how it goes. So there was this one stranger who was passing through a village one day. There was a circus in town, and all the animals there were around and with their respective trainers. While passing by, he noticed that a couple of the elephants, as part of the circus team, were just tied by a small, tiny rope onto their front foot. He was a little confused. He felt that the rope was too small. The elephants could just break out and escape at any time. But he kind of wondered why that was so, and decided to check that off with this trainer himself. So he walked around the path, reached the trainer, and reached out to him and asked him, "Hey, don't you think these elephants are bound to escape? How is that tiny rope holding on to them?" And to his surprise, the trainer said, "Well, when the elephants were tiny, they were tied to that small thread and that rope there, and that held them for so long. So through their life cycle, they kind of continued to believe that that small rope, tiny rope, is going to hold them and not allow them to escape." So it's true, they're not chained by huge iron chains or not caged, and they definitely can escape, but they're just conditioned to believe that they can't, and so they won't. I think that very typically tells us how most of our employees during their life cycle will continue to believe that they can't do something just because they haven't tried something out, or because they have mental barriers that stop them from doing something. So the moral of the story is that we as leaders need to be highly engaged with our team and create that environment so that our teams, our employees can realize their potential, maximize their potential, break away from their boundaries, and be able to achieve the impossible. Moving on. So that's what we do at Accenture. Our entire onboarding process is one that supports an employee right from onboarding till his entire journey here. And that's done through the program called Onboarding Through Year One. So year one at Accenture is extremely crucial and important. We realize that we don't stop at 3 sessions of orientation. That's, of course, just an acclimatization of what the company is, what we stand for, but it's essential to handhold an employee through the entire first year so that they become comfortable, connected, confident, and complete when you look at the emotional continuum space there. And to get that done, there are different aspects of the year one at Accenture that help you do that. So you have a mentor assigned to you. You have somebody called a career counselor who guides you at every step of your journey to tell you what's right, what your strengths are, what you can explore within the organization. And that's extremely important. So from the first day to 52 weeks down the line, an employee is coached, mentored, buddied, just so that he can realize what he can become at the end of his journey. And that's done through constant interaction, to continuous feedback, and of course, through different support mechanisms and resources that an employee has access to. And that's something that we as leaders need to be able to enable for our teams so that they have the resources right when they need them and they don't feel restricted for any reason.
There's a quick question in the chat.
Previous, a while back.
It just says, basically, how do we handle type A? I guess it might be applicable to this, but how do you manage people that have very strong type A personalities?
Yeah, we can respond in the chat.
Oh.
Okay. But I mean, if I have to call it out, then yes, the first point is definitely to recognize people with those kind of personalities. We need to know that people are different and no size fits all. That's what Samira spoke. So once we have identified a person with a certain conditioning, then of course through proper coaching, mentoring, and being able to have that kind of team involvement where one can share thoughts, exchange ideas, and be able to run together as the expected team and the expected performance, I think those would help a person be able to achieve what needs to be done. So there are different levers that need to be exercised, but of course, by knowing what conditions the employee in the first place, I think the battle is half won. I hope that answers your question, but we can get into more details if not. Here we have something called the universal truths of great performance. So even within Accenture, when we tried to lay down a performance achievement program, we first decided to see what were the foundation stones of performance, what triggers high performance, what is high performance, and research has shown some of these as being the most optimal ones. First is one that brings out the best of who you are. Like Samira said, I think it captures the strengths of people, that helps them utilize their strengths and be able to enrich themselves in that environment. That's what great performance is. Focusing on the vital few priorities. I myself have a to-do list that runs up to a couple of pages, and I'm sure most of us do. But picking out and sizing only those few priorities that really matter, have high value and maximum impact, can, I think, make the battle half won. So you need to identify those in a long list of priorities that you have and be able to focus on those things, because multitasking and doing different things at the same time is not going to help us. So identify what your priorities are and be able to tackle those one at a time. Engagement with the teams. We know that being an individualistic person is not going to be able to help in shared knowledge. So what's important is being able to create a team, maximize our strengths, and grow together as a team every day. So that's extremely crucial in the entire performance journey. Giving feedback in the moment. We spent some time on this previously too, and how important it is to not necessarily have a structured or an operational feedback over time, but to be able to give continuous feedback. Like Samira said, somebody being able to tell me I'm doing something incorrectly today would help me do that right, versus my manager telling me that you did something wrong 6 months ago. So that's not going to change things for me today. I should have known that back then. And that's what giving feedback in the moment really means. And of course, taking actions to grow. Feedback is incomplete if we don't know our areas of improvement. So any feedback that calls that out loud and says, this is where we need to improve, is important. And that's something that needs to be inbuilt into our entire performance achievement program.
Do you see mentoring as one of the key factors for high performance?
Definitely. I think performance in itself needs coaching and mentoring, and something that is ably done. I mean, one can't have a classroom kind of a session where one is mentored, because you have different groups of people and you have one kind of a mentor. So if every person is assigned somebody who's more like him or her, who understands the person's vision, where the person wants to go, and then be able to coach them on that journey, I think mentoring will have far-reaching effects then. So it's an important constituent of the entire performance achievement role. So that's performance achievement in itself, where it just helps you unlock your true potential and drive personal, team, and business performance. And that's something that Accenture has done actively, and something that's revolutionized the way we see performance today, built on those 5 universal truths. Okay, we're going to go through a fun exercise now, and I'm going to just request everybody to grab a small piece of paper and a pen, and we're going to do this live. So I'm going to need instant folks telling me how it's going. Okay, so the activity is that in a minute, I would request you all to write down a phrase. I will call out the phrase, and when I say go, that's when you begin. And when you finish, just let me know that you are done. You would be judged 2 parameters. One is quality, and one is the speed. One is the quality, and one is the speed. So make sure you're not compromising the quality because you want to finish first. Okay. So I'm going to repeat this again. I'm going to call out a phrase which you would need to write 3 times. And when I say go, you start. And you would be judged on 2 parameters, the quality and speed. When you're done, just call out and let me know you're done. Okay? So Don't start yet. I will tell go. Your phrase though is, I use my strengths every day. Okay. Now ready, set. Switch your pens to the other hand, the non-dominant hand. So if you're left-handed, use your right hand. If you're right-handed, use your left hand, and go. Make sure you're using the other hand. No cheating. 3 times.
Wow.
I'm sure all of you thought this, oh, this is an easy task. I can do this, like flip it over. Is anybody done yet? Okay. Another minute. Okay, time up. So what does this tell us? Isn't it much easier using your dominant or the hands that you have strength in to write down the phrases that we discussed? Wouldn't the speed have been much efficient with that hand? Wouldn't the quality of your writing have been much better using your more dominant hand? So that's what it says, that all of us have strengths in terms of approach to in a particular fashion. And we have to be in an environment that kind of helps us use those strengths so that we can complete our tasks every day. Imagine you doing your work all day long with the other hand, and how difficult that might be, how daunting it would be, and how tiring it would all seem. And at the end of it, you're taking double the time and not even getting it done in the best quality and the optimum way that you want it to be done. So that's the moral. Performance achievement is one that kind of helps you use your strengths, bring your strengths to the table, and be able to utilize that on an ongoing basis. I hope you enjoyed this exercise. Or the next one. So that's what performance achievement means. Focusing on yourself, bringing your strengths every day to the table and being able to use that at work, doing something that defines you the most, as the best person that you could be. Focusing on your team. Like I said, it's not something that you would do something individually, but to be able to do one collectively as a team so that not only you, but the team as a whole grows in the process. Taking actions to grow, which is, of course, again, improvement areas that you can work on over time and actually be able to progress. And all this is done through ongoing conversations, which is to your peers, being able to talk to your supervisors and others around you to be able to get those feedbacks in time, to understand how you're doing, and that's constituting you to do better each day. Performance, of course, like we said, is a continuous process, and I think that is amplified to the next level through learning and training and mentoring. But when one is establishing a learning and a training program, there are certain aspects that we need to look into to make sure that that learning is effective. Just going to give you an understanding of all of that. We will take each of these one by one. The relevance first. Starting somebody at an internship level and giving them a training on managing enterprises or leading in the new doesn't really help because it's not relevant to that person at that time. So learning is something that would be most relevant if it is at the right time, at the right place, and for the right person. So we need to make sure that our engagement and learning programs are relevant. Engaging in collaboration, yes. Somebody doing a learning synthesis at the corner of the classroom isn't really helpful. The learning program needs to be able to be interactive with the person, to be able to make sure he or she can share his inputs in the learning process so that it's collaborative and brings out the best in the person too. Contextual. A lot of times learning programs are ones that at the end of it you realize, why did I do this? Where did it help me? How is it going to teach me to do something differently? So I think the big picture becomes extremely important, and it's important to start with that and keep that picture throughout the learning process. Effortful. It's good if your learning program is a little tough to get the folks on the learning schedule be able to evaluate themselves, feel good when they complete it and say, yes, I secured something. It was tough and I was able to do it, versus something that's just monotonous running and that everybody can conquer. Generative, yes, something that demands the learner's intellect, tells him or her to explore, be able to come back with ideas, be able to share his insights, his or her insights, I think is really impactful. Social, again, which is inclusive, has a couple of people involved versus somebody doing that by themselves independently. Practice, which allows you to stimulate and how your learnings would actually make an impact, versus just a textbook style of learning where you're learning something without application. Spaced, something that is nurtured to make it travel over time, not one that you start at the beginning and then for 5 years you don't know how that works, and then you do your own thing. So something that needs to be a refresher course, which kind of helps you go back to it, learn, relearn, unlearn, and be able to do your own thing.
We have a question. Sure. So we have a team of 5 entrepreneurs who are watching this presentation together, and they want to know, during the interview process, what types of questions, do you have any examples, would you recommend to find these traits in the candidate, specifically for social entrepreneurship, and to assess their commitment to the cause?
Sure. So we did have a list of questions. I don't have that ready with me, but that's something maybe I can share with you. But basically, things that judge a person's personality are extremely crucial in an interview process, like we have covered in the past. Qualifications, skills, etc., are some things that can be taught to people, that you can train people on, but their personality, their core values, those are something that's already enriched within a person. And that's something that you would need to evaluate to make sure that the person that you intend to hire shares the same kind of values and the competencies that you think your company stands for. We do have some questions that kind of hinder upon those aspects, and that's something maybe I can share with you and you can circulate to the group for their reference. And that would probably enable you to be able to select the right person for your enterprise a little better.
Yeah, what I'm seeing is not exactly the questions, it is how the person responds to a question.
Exactly.
Makes a lot of difference.
Yes.
Typical question is, introduce yourself. That introduce yourself tells so many things which is hidden. So I was talking about, it is not about the question exactly, it is about how the person responds to a particular question. So for example, we are trying to understand the transparency. You can see the body language, you can see the words he chooses or she chooses would tell you whether the person is genuine, whether the person is really talking from within. And you can see the passion, the way, say for example, I saw Shimon talk the other day. He can very clearly articulate what he loves. And when you see that this is exactly what I want, and this person's passion matches, I know I'm looking for the right person and he's the right fit. So it is not about the question, it is how the person reacts to the question and responds to it.
Exactly.
I think that's
I agree. And I think, sure. Go ahead.
Just to add to that point, there are few other questions that are common questions on interviews, like talk about your experience, like giving a scenario-based questions. So for example, in such and such scenario, what would you do? So that's more like to get into the head of how they think, how they would work, what's their morale like when they work, and also ask them to share past experiences of challenges. That also tells about the person, how they handle challenges, how they work with other people. So scenario-based questions also help to get that insight about people and learn more about them.
Exactly. And more open-ended. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Hi, so I'm John, and I head growth at a edtech startup called Mindsima, and we actually couple months ago went through a hiring process as well. So what we like to do is we just throw up a question. So for example, we were hiring someone for B2B marketing and saying, what's your idea of how you would acquire new leads? And we put that question on the board, and each of us goes around the room and we take 2 minutes and we jot down ideas, and then we have a debate and we pick the first top 2 ideas that we enjoy. But what that shows us is we go around and we can have a healthy conversation so that you can see how the other person responds and how they frame up their ideas. And also it gives you a good idea of their personality, how can they think on their feet, if they're resourceful. Because I think one of the biggest traits at a startup when you don't have a lot of people is this person resourceful? Can they get things done on their own? Because you just don't have a big budget or a lot of resources to have access to. So that little exercise itself actually helps us in determining, is this person going to be able to work in this specific type of environment? And are we going to be able to work with this person?
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, I mean, to just piggyback on what others have said, questions could be more open-ended versus factual. So you don't have a right or wrong answer already preconceived in your mind, but something that you want to hear the person talk more about elaborately. So that's where you can judge the different traits that you see. And the other upcoming trend we see nowadays is having group interviews as a second or a third level of interviewing process, where you have people in a group. We spoke about how people need to work in teams, and I think bringing about a group interview to be able to see how people respond to others' questions, others' inputs, whether they're comfortable sharing their ideas in the presence of other people, their body language there, etc., can also bring out and let you know whether the person is going to do well in that team-based setting. So that necessarily need not be a first level interview, but as you go through the process, when you have a group of candidates all vying for the position and you want to decide who is better than the others, then that's something probably that could work.
There's one thing I want to add is what we have talked is pretty much how we hire a team member. If we are talking about a person to be an individual contributor, it could be a little different, where we look for the subject matter expertise that person has and independently how the person can really deliver to the requirement. So in that scenario, you may not really look for how is the person's interpersonal skills, more about what strength he or she brings in for that particular requirement that we have. So that's a little different when you are hiring an individual contributor. That's a little different.
But I agree completely to that. But knowing that we want a person to live in the organization through his tenure, and at some point he would reach that leadership stage where he would need to be with the people, it's good to kind of see whether he has those traits, not necessarily strong enough, but yes, he carries those that could be groomed over time. So,
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your questions. I think that just triggered a good session of discussions with us. So here's what research is telling us, that the mode of training and teaching is best through being able to actually tender to somebody in that process. And by that, I mean to teaching somebody how to do best at their job. So lecture mode could be one, demonstration could be the other, or practice could be the third. But the one mode that allows somebody to learn best is through the teaching mode itself, where the teacher learns a lot more in the process by teaching his or her students. And that's where at Accenture we have our experts being able to tailor make the different training programs, so that in the process of doing so, they realize a lot of things still need to be included, and they reach out and learn themselves and are able to teach the others. And to sum it all up, as Rahul Verma, our head of talent and learning, would say, learning is often the reason people join Accenture and why they choose to stay. So I think that makes a fine line of difference between somebody joining your own enterprise and others. And in customary style, I think I'll end the presentation with a small story. You'd notice that I'm using a lot of animals while in the discussion, but I have a 1-year-old, and that's my bedtime routine. But I think that they carry a lot of moral and messaging at the end of each of it. So I'm going to spend 2 times about the frogs in the deep pit, and let me know what you think of the story as well. So one sunny day, there were a couple of frogs that were going merrily through the forest. The frogs, unfortunately, fell into a deep, deep pit. And the rest of the frogs were really skeptical about it and started hunting up and about to be able to save the other two friends from the pit. They tried different modes. They tried for a couple of hours and nothing helped. The two little frogs, though, were like scared to death, and they started jumping themselves, trying to see whether they could come out of the pit themselves. Nothing worked. A couple of hours passed, and with nothing else to do, the other frogs at the top of the pit yelled to the frogs at the bottom and said, you guys are not going to make it. Just give up. I don't think it's worth the effort because so many hours have been lost and we've not been able to do anything. So, just let go. Just resign to your fate. One of the frogs heard this, tried for some time, and fell down further and gave up. The other frog, however, kept jumping higher and higher again. The other frogs at the top of the pit were like a little curious and said, no, stop, let go. But this frog kept jumping at every attempt higher and higher until he came out of the pit himself. The other frogs were amazed. They rushed to him. This frog was, of course, breathless with all his effort and reached out and checked with him as to what the problem was. How did he manage to get out of the pit when the other frog just gave up? He said, so much to the other frog's amusement, this frog said, oh, were you guys really telling me that I should give up? Were you discouraging me? I'm actually hard at hearing, and I didn't hear you guys. I thought you were cheering for me at the top of the pit. So moral of the story, all of us as leaders leave a large inspirational trait on all of our followers. So what we do and say make a huge impact on them. And it's up to us to shape their careers and grow our enterprises even further. So best of luck to all of you all. I hope you had a great session. I hope you have some takeaways from this learning. And we're here in case you have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. That was a, can everyone see me okay?
I think they're looking at this.
Okay, I'm over there. You're seeing the presentation.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Please go.
All right, thank you for joining us virtually. I think those topics hit on a few great points. If I could take a few takeaways, is really you want to make sure to identify people that are going to align with your mission. You want to make sure you understand how their temperament is going to be, depending on the jobs you're going to place them in, and always just focusing on positivity and developing them through positive reinforcement while addressing some of the areas for improvement. So thank you guys very much. Awesome session. So for our next segment, we have a session on sales pitching geared towards startups and social entrepreneur type businesses. So we have two people that are going to lead this session. And we have Jitendra. So he leads our Accenture Ventures effort, which he actually deals a lot with startups and aligning their products potentially with potential of with some of our potential clients. So he has a lot of exposure in dealing with entrepreneurship, with entrepreneurs, and has a lot of exposure to innovation as well. Our other presenter is Scott, and he's our global lead of our open innovation effort. And they prepared a very engaging presentation for all you today. So, and for all of us here in person, please just provide your questions. We want to make this very interactive. You can please provide your questions in real time. On the chat, I know it's difficult sometimes to type quickly, but we're monitoring the chat closely to make sure we address your questions as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to our presenters. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody on the call. Thanks for dialing in. Just trying to get orientation on how this works.
So
Yep.
this is where you want to look.
Yeah, but
Oh, there's a
delay.
delay. So you just want to keep going as.
Right.
Can you move the screen up?
Yeah, there we go. I think I'm standing in the right spot. This is perfect. Okay. This is a good place to be. Otherwise, the head gets shut down. That's fine. So we can walk or talk.
Let me just load up the presentation and just give me 1 second.
So while we're doing that, maybe I'll just give a introduction to myself, and then Scott, yourself as well. So hi, I'm Jitendra. I run Open Innovation in the Ventures organization. Very proud to be here. Taking innovation in many different forms from everywhere in the world. Not only our clients, but also the big social causes and the big challenges in the world is a very gratifying thing to do within Accenture every day. And so I'm very humbled and proud to be part of the team at Accenture that does that. I have a colleague of mine, Scott, who's going to join me as well. And maybe Scott, you can introduce yourself a little bit, and I'll talk about my background as well.
Sure. My name is Scott Armanini. I work for Jitendra, and it's an honor and privilege to be here today to share some ideas with you about how you might consider pitching your ideas to social investors.
And Scott has a rich background in social investing and working with nonprofits.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about serving the planet. For many years, I worked for large corporations, and I left back in 2004, went into the nonprofit world, frankly, because I didn't want my tombstone to read that I had made billions of dollars for large corporations. There had to be more to life than just making money. And so I've been a nonprofit executive. I've had the privilege of serving in as well as in a line capacity, serving the public. I happen to advise a few social enterprises right now, and I've even invested in one and considering another, but that's a sideline. Most investors, what you're asking for is their time. That's the one thing that is the scarcest commodity on the planet, is the time. And so I freely share my time and advice with social enterprises.
Great. Thanks, Scott. So we're going to present together. Thank you, Scott, for putting the materials together and framing how we want to have this conversation with our friends here. Just by way of background, I have a technology background. I've been with Accenture for about 5 years, but before that, spent about 20 years in the Valley, working with startups, being at startups, but also large companies. And but in the recent years, I've spent more time in the social impact world. I'm a judge at the Tech Awards with the Tech Museum. It's a fairly well-known program. Work with a number of different nonprofits as well, and very much passionate, as I was saying earlier, in terms of bringing the impact of innovations and innovators that are the supply side of innovation for our world today to the demand side, which is the nonprofits, the NGOs, as well as the corporates that are trying to solve big problems, both commercially and for social impact. So we have a few slides to work through, but it's really trying to give some practical advice, some practical tips, and maybe even some tools, Scott. Yeah. And we'll close with some closing thoughts as well. So the actual flow will look something like this. The first point is, so the topic that we're going to talk about specifically today is, as you're gathering your capital, your money, when you're going to investors, how do you have that conversation with the investors? What do you need to bring to the investors? What do the investors want to hear from you? And how do you prepare yourself for those conversations in order to raise the money that you need to run your business? And when we look at it that way, it's not too hard to start to think about, well, how is that different than raising money from venture capitalists for for-profit type of enterprises? And the fact is, there are a lot of overlap, but there's very clear differences as well. And then we'll get into an anatomy of a pitch. We'll start looking at the details of what that pitch could look like, and we'll have some commentary. We'll give an example of a social entrepreneur out there and look at her business plan, and kind of look at what's really maybe some of the gaps, and some practical tools, like I said, and we'll get some closing thoughts. So when it comes to the social impact versus the VC pitches, Scott, what is the difference? How would you characterize the differences here?
Yeah, I would say that the main difference is that when you're looking for social impact investors, they want to understand how you are going to impact the lives and the well-being of people and the planet. Fundamentally, that's it. They're also going to look for how you are able to improve the return on investment that are going to directly impact these two metrics. How are you impacting society? How are you impacting the planet? And this is true whether you are a for-profit social enterprise or you are a nonprofit social enterprise. The fundamental metric here is impact on society, impact on the planet.
Okay, good. So why don't we go into an example, or actually a framework, and then we'll get an example afterwards. So the anatomy of a pitch. Think about looking at your pitch not only as the presentation, but the whole story of who you are, what you're trying to achieve, what impact you want to make, and the rigor of really making sure that you're going to make those impacts. So it's really a storyline that you're creating, not just a PowerPoint deck. So when we think about the anatomy of a pitch, first of all, let's talk about the impact. The first question that's going to come in people's minds, the investors' minds you're going to pitch it to, is, who are you? Number one point. A close second is, what are you trying to do? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? But going back to who you are, you have to think about people are going to spend and invest not only their money, but also their time to work with you on something that they themselves are very, very passionate about. Some problem out there that they're very passionate about. You are an instrument for their own vision for where the world should go. You're a channel for them to use their capital in ways they want to use it to make the impact that they want to make it. You're not the only one in the room that has the same dream that they might have. And that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. But what it means is, who are you? And why are you here talking to me as an investor to raise capital for what you're trying to do? And there's many cases where there's some big issues. There's a lot of innovators that are trying to go after the same issues. What makes you stand out? And the way to think about this is make that storyline very poetic, at least to yourself. There's a reason why you are right here, that you have the privilege to ask for some funding in order to make a big impact. There's a reason. What is that reason? What is it about you? What is it about your history? What is it about your calling? Why are you here? So really understand that. And we had a presenter on Thursday night about the sustainable fishery in Peru. You started off by talking about who you are. Talk about Italy, where you came from. The waters in you. This is authentically you. Very, 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 very important to nail. When we start talking about the problem statement and the impact potential, again, you're probably not going to be the only person in the room that has passion for this topic. If you have to spend a lot of time talking about why this topic is important, you're probably going to be missing the mark. If you have to educate your investor on why you are doing this, what is it you're trying to impact? Think about whether the investor even wanted to do this or not. What you want to find are the investors that want to go make the same dream that you have to make that happen. And your job is to get to the why of the question very, very quickly. Like the biggest impact that you can make in the most unique way that you can say it, of why this problem area is important to you personally and why you are committed to doing this. Don't go on and on about the academic reason why this is important and how this is going to solve world hunger again. The impact investors have seen these presentations again and again and again and again. What is it about this particular situation that grabs their attention quickly? Scott, anything you want to add there? So
I completely agree. You have to make this a personal story, and you have to establish in the first few moments that personal connection with the prospective investor. There has to be a shared vision and a shared mission. And once those two are established, once you have that level of trust and credibility established, now you have an opportunity in order to have a substantive discussion, a detailed conversation about how to address the problem and how to solve it. If you have a mismatch or a misalignment of your objectives and your mission and the prospective investor's mission and objectives, then there's really no opportunity for a successful outcome. So it's not only important that you understand your audience, that is to say, the constituency that you're trying to serve in the world, it's equally important that you understand the person to whom you're seeking time and money. If you have that alignment, you have a chance for success.
The next part is more of the basics, as we like to say. You know, the company overview, frankly, is really a way to show that you have credibility. You have taken the first step to incorporate the company. It's a legal entity. It's governed. When you receive funds and money and help, you legally have the framework to hold that money in a trustful way. That's it. Move on quickly. When you start thinking about your story, obviously, at the end of the day, it takes a whole team and a whole ecosystem to create the impacts that you're trying to create. Then the question is, who is this team? Who is this ecosystem that's going to help you get there? Demonstrating that you have a strong management advisory team is really another way of showing that you're aligning passions of the people that are on your team. These are credible people. They have the expertise to do what you need the organization to do. And they're going to be committed. They're going to be so committed that it's not about financial upside right now. It's about getting this thing going. That commitment is important. And you know, all the recognitions and awards and achievements and advisory teams and all these things, those are very important too. It shows that you're in the fabric of these conversations. You're in it. Great, you're passionate. Great, you have a poetic story of how you got here. Great, you're going after a big problem. But if you're not really connected into how the big problem people are trying to solve these things, you're kind of out of it. So these kind of awards and things just show that you're part of it. It creates a safety factor for the investors to say, okay, this doesn't seem like it's off in the weeds. I see how this person's really connected in, and we have a strong team.
These are systemic problems that we're trying to address. So it's essential, as Jitendra said, that you establish your credibility as being a participant in the conversation, either at a local, regional, or at a global level. You're showing that you have not only the aptitude to understand the problem, but you have the capability to actually achieve an outcome in a measurable way. Because at the end of the day, what we're asking the investor for is to lend their credibility and their time, that is to say their intellectual capital, towards this cause and towards your approach to solving or addressing this cause. So fundamentally, we must establish the fact that we not only understand the problem space, but we have a viable solution, and most importantly, we, the team that's making this ask, has the ability to execute, not just once, but on a repeatable basis. Scalability here is the key.
So now let's get into the details of how your business works, how the enterprise works. Who are you serving is a very important part here. And the passion and the big picture of how you're going to approach these big problems, at the end of the day, has to at least impact one person. You're going to impact millions of people, but it has to at least impact one, and you have to show that one person how you are impacting them. If you can't show one person in a very rich, deep, impactful manner to an investor, you're talking theoretical. Don't lose sight of that. This isn't a question of big numbers. Everybody gets big numbers. Everybody wants to go after big numbers. Every business plan has big numbers. Many business plans don't have one person. This person's life changed because of the approach we took around this. And we think we can replicate that one example to many, many groups. So the who you're serving really matters, but be crisp and clear on it. The product and service, again, this is something I think everybody, what's unique? The bigger the problem, the more entrepreneurs are going after the same problem, the more the investors have to pick and choose, okay, which ones are we going to invest in? What's unique about yourself? What makes you stand out? Pretty self-explanatory.
That's a quick question.
Yeah.
How does this pitch change when you're, I guess, going for the angel seed round versus a Series A, Series B? Because when you're starting early, you don't have as much of the credibility, you don't have as much example in the economics to prove out. Versus a Series A or B, you have the model already in place, you're just getting scale.
Yep, good question.
So we should repeat the question just to make certain that it's understood.
Can you the question, just please come step to the front of it.
So we can repeat it too.
Yeah, we can repeat. So if I understand the question correctly, the pitch is going to vary according to the audience, but also according to the ask that we're making, because there are many phases of investment. There's angel funding, there are later stages of funding, and so how does our approach vary based upon the magnitude of the request that we're making?
Yeah, I think correct, and it's a really good question. At the early stage investing, a lot of what we see is basically, do you have anything to work with? Have you taken the efforts to apply yourself? Are you able to kind of create a team and a fabric to operate with it? And are you starting to see some impact somewhere? Show me the impact there. It's just the starting point. A lot of times it's a passion project. A lot of times it's a lot of risk, obviously. The later stage, when you're looking to grow and you're going to later stage investments, you're really saying that I already have something. I have a model that works. I have a team. I'm showing success. I think I can expand my success if I was able to raise this type of capital. It's the next stage, it's growth investing. And then when you get into the, kind of even bigger levels of investment, you're really saying, I got this model now. I really understand the ecosystem. A lot more growth if I look at it this way and build upon it. So there's different stages. Some of this, I'd say a lot of this is really geared towards the earlier stage. But there's elements of here that got to nail it every time. Just every time has to nail it. Sometimes the metrics matter more as you get in a growth stage mode.
For me, the key is humility at every phase. When you're at the beginning of your journey, initial funding, that's probably going to come out of your pockets and out of your friends and family. And so what we're trying to show here is that we understand a problem. We understand some aspect of a problem, but we don't understand fully all aspects of the problem, nor of the solution. And so we're trying to be humble and say, we are going on a learning expedition. And we believe that this expedition is worthy of your time and investment. And there's funding that goes with that if you're so interested. But at the earliest stages, you're really looking for an advisory board who can help you shape your ideas and shape a potential solution. And then over time, we're going to gather evidence about, is our theory, is our hypothesis about the problem area correct? Is our hypothesis about who we're serving correct? Is our hypothesis about what their needs are correct? So there's large areas of uncertainty at the beginning of the journey, and those narrow, hopefully those narrow over time as we're getting towards the later stage of investment. But at the earliest stages, what we're really asking for is somebody to come along on the journey with us and be valiant explorers to help us discover the truth, because fundamentally we're all truth seekers in this area. How do we understand the truth about a problem area? How do we understand the potential solution, the universe of solutions to this area? And then which are the most viable, the highest and best uses of our time and your time as we try to solve these together. So I'd say that when you're pitching early on, humility is the key, more so than perhaps at later stages. As we get to later stages, as Rachinda said, we have more evidence of what the problem and solution areas are, and therefore hopefully we have some evidence of success in terms of how we have responded to this and now we're asking for a commitment to help us scale, right? But again, for me, it's about being humble and asking for people to come along on the journey with us. Does that help?
Yeah, good question. Thank you for framing that question.
There's a couple of questions on the chat now. If you
Here's a question from Heather.
From Heather, to what extent would you recommend using case studies outside of your business if you haven't already reached a point of impact yet? Would this seem to deflect originality, uniqueness, etc.? That's a good example. I think I don't think it necessarily deflects it too much if you do it right. So adjacent industries, adjacent business models. I think it shows a dynamic mind in terms of how you look at systems and systemic problems. And I think you can demonstrate that you have seen how this could work in other areas if you do it well. And you have to obviously connect it back to why are you bringing this up? Why are you bringing this up? Why are you bringing this adjacent issue up when we're talking about this? And if you can make that connection of why you are, then I think it could be good. But be careful about, back to the point of you're really getting time from this investor in front of you. Be careful about using up that time in ways that aren't directly applicable to what you want. So if you feel it has impact, it can be done in a good way. Yeah. Let's move on. I'm going to be, thinking about the time. The other point is the business model and the unit economics. So unit economics, right? So for every dollar you put in, how much impact are you doing socially, and how much money you're making in the process? For every dollar, I affect 3 children, and I break even. For every dollar, I affect 5 people, and I make $2. Right? So what is that unit economics? That is very important for any business model. What you have is the additional responsibility of not only showing unit economics as it relates to financial return, you have to show unit economics as it relates to social return, the human impact. And when you start to take those unit economics and create a system and a business plan, a couple of things I'll say. One is think of what Larry Page from Google, one of the founders of Google, said some time ago. He said the best business plans that he likes to consider are the laziest ones. The laziest, the easiest, the no-brainers. Just if we just did this, it would be so much easier and it would just win. And there's a lot of wisdom to what he has to say. One of the wisdom is, what's the unique approach to solving this problem that may be innovative enough where people that have been trying very hard to solve this problem didn't figure it out because they weren't innovative, they didn't find the innovation to go make that happen. That innovation could be a technology innovation. In the case of Google, it's search-based ads. That was their business model. But it could be human innovation too. It could be your approach. You could be looking at it differently. But try to find the path that's the easiest path to get through. And that, we call it lazy. Of course, you're going to be working really hard on whatever path you choose. But the model itself can be simple and elegant. And that's really important when it comes to scale. And it's really important from investors to take a look at, because it's good that everybody's going to be working hard. It's good that everybody's committed and passionate. But if they're working too hard, should I put my money somewhere else? To another company or another organization that seems to have a much easier model to get to the same outcome I'm trying to get to. So think about that. And I think also to think about the financial return and the metrics on the impact. Of course, we said the metrics have to be both financial and social. Invariably, and if you talk to investors, certainly in the venture capital world, and I would imagine it relates to the social capital world as well, those spreadsheets are beautiful. I spent a lot of time on spreadsheets. And I was a founder of a startup, CEO of a startup, been involved in all of this. And it's so exciting to put that spreadsheet together to talk about how with these things we can create $1 billion. It's fun. It's fun to come up with that. You're going to have 100,000 users in 3 months, and then that's going to grow by 10% every quarter. And then Excel spreadsheet exercise is an open loop exercise. No matter if you artificially put in the breaks and you start saying, well, no, we're not going to make that much, and here's the churn, and the investors at the end of the day are going to take your numbers, and they're going to say, you're maybe going to hit 10% of that number, maybe. And even then, I'm going to sandbag it to, is it going to be 20% chance you're going to hit 10%, or is it going to be 80% chance you're going to hit 10%? So what do? You have to show big numbers. You have to show there's a big space. You have passion. You're going to go for it, but you also have to be very credible in how you bring this across. And again, going back to this one person, we have changed something about their life because the mission that we're on, that's all we're trying to replicate. And we have credibility to go do that. And I understand the model, the economic model well enough, I can put it on a spreadsheet. That's where, of course, we're going to go after that. Or we're just going to keep going. Anything else, Scott?
Well, if you take the 10% rule and discount it further, you're probably looking at 1% or maybe 2% of your total original projections. And it just goes to say that understanding the problem space is the most important aspect of this. If you understand the problem space and can demonstrate that credibility, and if you can tell that one individual story, make it very personal and show the outcome, and then demonstrate how there are literally tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people like this one person who you've served, now there's an opportunity to have a discussion about scale. And is there a unit economic model here that says if I put in $1, I'm going to get back the desired metric in terms of both profit and social impact? If that conversation can't be had, there's really no opportunity to move the conversation forward. Right? You've got to have that level of credibility. And so there's a slide we're going to show here in just a moment, but I think the lesson here is that no business plan really survives the first contact with reality, with the marketplace. So we're always going to be on a learning journey. We're always going to be iterating our model and our approach towards the truth. We have to embrace that fear. We have to embrace that uncertainty and be willing to demonstrate that level of humility with potential investors.
And just to finish off this anatomy point, and we can move on to a case study quickly. Showing the progress so far, it's on you. You have to get started. You can't wait to get funded in order to go do something. You have to just do it, regardless of where the funding is going to come from. And you have to demonstrate that. You have to show that, especially in the early stage funding area. Figure out how to scale up. When you talk about scaling up, it's really about partnership in the ecosystem, not just you yourself trying to figure it out yourself with your organization. The scaling up really is going to be partnerships with others, and finding that those synergies with others really will allow you to kind of go to the next level. And that's a scary time, because it feels like you're losing control. And in fact, you are, because you're not in control. And you're going from an independent kind of mindset, which you were established yourself as, okay, I'm an independent operator. And you're trying to get to an interdependent model. You're trying to get to the point where we're all trying to get to here, different organizations. How do we depend on each other, and how do we build the economic constructs and the business constructs and the trustful constructs so that we can do it together to have the bigger impact? And that's a big step. Challenges and mitigations: be realistic, be critical of your own plan. This is the best time to bring out what your what your weaknesses are. You can also talk about the failures that you've had to get to this point. Very, very important. It's not only to Scott's major point about humility, it's also to show credibility. From an investor perspective, I can see the hole. If you can't tell me that you see the same hole, then we're not talking the same language, right? I can't trust I'm going to give you money to go figure this out. It's too much good conversation and good talk. I know about the space. I know what's going on too, and I see a hole right here. You're not addressing it. So you have to be the first to address the hole in your plan, and then of course you have to talk about what you're going to do about it. What's the mitigation? What will you do about it? And finally, I'll say, make the ask. I don't know how many times we've seen business plans and business models where they're not asking for anything. And you really wonder, really, was the whole point of this just to get to us to pitch? No, the point is you're trying to get somewhere. You're asking us to help you. So ask, make the ask. What words are you going to say, I ask this of you. Will you do this? Make the ask. The endorphin rush that you should get is not from just showing up and getting to present in front of an investor. The endorphin rush is going to come much later. So the ask of the capital is one ask, but Scott, what else can we say about the ask?
Well, in sales, this is called asking for the order. And it's exactly the same approach when you're asking for an investor to come on the journey with you and invest their time and energy, their intellectual capital, which is, of course, not only their personal knowledge, but the extended knowledge of their entire network. And there's some money that's going to go along with that as well. And if I can't have pride in what I'm trying to accomplish and extend my hand and ask for you to come along with that, then it's not worth the time of the investor to even consider the opportunity. I have to be a fearless explorer. And part of that fearlessness is being able to ask for help. As Jitendra said, and I think said so eloquently, there are so many unknowns here. You have to be able to say, I don't know everything about this. I understand a lot about the problem space and the potential solution area, but I need your help. Will you come with me? Will you join me? So extend your hand and ask for the order. I need X in order to accomplish Y in a Z time frame. And if we do this together, we can make this happen.
There's no way you can get a date if you don't ask the other person. They're not just going to follow you and maybe have a date with you somehow. You have to ask. Okay? And it takes courage to do it, obviously. So I'm mindful of the time.
Yeah.
We have about 20 minutes left.
Okay.
So maybe when we go through the case study, we can go quickly through it and we'll close. Yeah. Do we have another question? Or?
Well, we have entrepreneurs who are interested in hearing a pitch.
Okay. So we'll go through that one. So
Yeah,
we'll definitely spend some time
We
on
can
that.
do that.
Just go ahead.
Oh, I love this slide.
I love this slide too.
Because I can't say how many times I've seen the left-hand side. It's in almost every presentation. I wish somebody would have the courage to show the right-hand side as part of their pitch deck, because it says that this is a learning journey, that we are going to be testing hypotheses, we're going to be evaluating the evidence, and we're going to make informed iterations on the basis of the evidence. We are committed to being truth seekers, and we are going to take this business model exactly where the truth takes us.
Yeah, this is which general? Was it Napoleon? Was it Churchill? No, it was Mike Tyson.
General Tyson.
General Tyson that had this quote. He said something like, I'm just paraphrasing, you can have all the great strategy in the world. That's the straight line. It looks like that's the strategy. That's how everything's going to work. As soon as you get into that boxing ring and somebody punches you in the nose, that strategy's out the window. You're in a different zone. You're like somewhere else now. And so you need a strategy, obviously, to keep trying to come back to. But if you're really in this, it ain't going to work as a textbook Excel spreadsheet, PowerPoint deck. You will have to go through this and be cognizant of that.
Be humble. It never is a straight line.
There's a question coming up. Basically, the question is, how do you overcome the fear of asking for money? Scott.
Well, let's put it on the table. We are all afraid of something. Most of us are afraid of many things. The person that you're asking for help, they have more fears and uncertainties and doubts than you could even begin to imagine. This is called being human. The corollary would be we'd be all be robots if we didn't have these fears and uncertainties and doubts. And we're not robotic. We're emotional beings. And so it's natural to have this fear. But we can embrace it. We can recognize that the person that we're speaking to, whether they're a prospective investor or a prospective partner or a prospective beneficiary of the services that we're trying to bring to market, we're all the same. We're all the same. So all you have to do is just really have the courage to have a conversation. Once you start exploring through simple words, you'll realize you have much more in common than not, and the ask becomes second nature.
The fear will make you repel the opportunities that are in front of you. Your own fear will repel the opportunity. You are repelling the opportunity. If you think about fear, and be honest, it is fearful, but you think about it more, use the word vulnerability, that you're vulnerable, then you will attract those opportunities to you. That's the golden rule. Your own fear will shut everything down and will repel the opportunities. But if you're honest, if you have a vision in mind that you are headed in that direction, you are poetically following your life path on this path, that vulnerability of knowing how to ask and building up the courage to ask, being vulnerable to ask, doing it in a vulnerable way, will attract people to you, will attract the opportunities to you in a very strong fashion.
Absolutely.
So it's the same energy, but just cast it in your mind differently than this way. Yeah.
We're all vulnerable. I mean, and we all have fears. I mean, just being up here today, sharing some ideas with you.
We're very vulnerable on time, so let's keep moving here.
All right.
So go ahead.
Pitch example. So you want to introduce the...
Yeah, so that's a friend of mine. So her name is Roya Mahbub. Roya lives in Afghanistan. She grew up in Taliban-run Afghanistan. She's when she was a young girl, she's still a young woman. When she was in her teens, let's say, she discovered computers and she discovered the internet at her, I think it was her brother or something, introduced her. And she found herself, her personality, who she is, through that experience. Meaning, through an anonymous way to interact with people outside of Afghanistan, to come up and discover herself and her personality and have engagements and have conversations and explore different things. These are conversations and experiences that she was not able to have in her home country, in her home, in her culture, in the government, the religious order. She matured herself. She realized that there's a whole population in Afghanistan, these are these young girls, that are not finding themselves. And so she committed to starting an education program in Afghanistan for young women to get them digital literacy, get them on the internet, and start to build not only the personality development opportunities, but also the skills to succeed. How do we get these girls to actually get jobs when they come out of high school and when they start to go into college? And so to date, I mean, her credentials are, 8,000 students have gone through her program. Senator John Kerry is a big fan of it. I'm blanking on name. Sheryl Sandberg, Craig Newmark. I mean, so a lot of people are excited. She's Time 100. She's done an amazing thing, and she's still very humble the whole way through. And so this is her business has multiple aspects to it, and it could be going in different directions. But this is one example of what she's put together.
Sure. And this is designed to be an illustration of what a good pitch might look like. We're not going to show the entire presentation, but we will show some of the main topics that she has in this deck. And I like this because I would say this has good bone structure. It has the right elements that would lead towards an eventual ask. And that ask is going to be different based upon the audience to whom she's pitching. If she's pitching to government officials, it's going to have a certain ask. If I'm pitching towards prospective NGOs, non-government organizations, it will have a different slant. And if I'm pitching towards social investors, it would have yet a third pitch. So let's just go through this. We start with the vision and the ultimate aspirations for the organization. Again, I'm not going to read the slide, but it's important that you have a vision that is identical or in a close proximity towards your audience. So let's make certain that we are speaking to the right type of prospective investor or other type of partner. So, is there a vision statement? Is there a problem that's well understood and well defined? Is there an explanation about the market potential? Is there a proposed solution? A solution that explicitly describes why our solution is a preferred one over other alternatives. Mission, how we work, social impact, connecting the dots in an explicit manner. It's easily understood. Who are we? What are our credentials? Do we understand the space on a local, regional, or global level? Do we have the experience in order to execute on our proposal? Do we have a unique value proposition? A value proposition that's different than other market entrants and other incumbents in this space. What is our offering? And what is the benefit? Who are the competitors? What does the opportunity space look like? And how are we different? Earlier, there was a question about should we use examples from other industries or other providers? In this particular example, you can see that they've called out explicitly that yes, we are X plus Y equals Z, which is better than X or Y by themselves. That's a great message. It allows the potential investor to say, I understand X, I understand Y. Now I can see why Z is much better. And of course, why it's the least risk, highest reward, most impactful, and that's the key, the most impactful opportunity. What is our goal? What is we're trying to achieve? It doesn't go into exactly how we're going to be partnering together with a government official or government ministry or an NGO or the prospective venture investor. But this is what we're trying to achieve. Here's the outcome. It's specific, it's measurable, it's action-oriented, it's realistic, and it's time-bound, or what you call SMART in terms of what we're trying to achieve. Partnerships that we already have in place. Our business model, 3 different tiers. Our projections, our sensitivity analysis. How realistic is it? And that's it.
Just sample. We went through it fairly quickly, but you know the internet is your friend. You can find examples of social impact business models out there, and of course NESsT is a great resource with the advisors. We're a resource to help as well. But I think in the case of Eddie, this particular business plan, in this case, Roya probably, I mean, there's 2 things. One is, of course, it's a great story. Everybody loves the story of affecting young women in Afghanistan, creating building skills to succeed. So that's a good backdrop. The standout is her and her personal story, and that's really what people are drawn to. The investors and the help that she's getting is really around her and her team that she's put together. And the second is her credibility. The fact is she's gone through 8,000 students now there, and she's expanding. So she has a model that works. The unit economic works. And she's able to take that and start to expand. So when we talk about the anatomy of a business plan, it's not as if every one of those items you have to be rock solid. Figure out which part of this is really your sweet spot and what your strengths are, and play to your strengths. Nobody's perfect on this.
Yeah, in fact, be that fearless explorer. I love the tools that are out in the marketplace right now. They're public domain, Creative Commons available. Alexander Osterwalder, who is a professor at the University of St. Gallens in Switzerland. There's a concept of a business model canvas that he created many years ago. Model canvas is designed to, on a single sheet of paper, be able to clearly and simply explain all aspects of your business. Now, he's modified that to create a mission model canvas, which is designed for social enterprises, whether they're for-profit or not-for-profit. And so I encourage you to consider this as a potential source of how to present, how to conceive, and how to explore, and then how to present your business model. Investors will want to understand that you understand all aspects of this before they are going to commit time and energy towards your initiative. That doesn't mean that you have to have answers for everything, but you must have the right questions to ask. There has to be alignment between your vision, their vision, your view of how, of what additional data is needed in order to make informed decisions, and their view of the same. It's not about necessarily the answers, it's about what questions to ask and in what order of operation.
I think this tool is a very good tool. We use this at Accenture. There's a social version of this, as Scott just mentioned. Think about using this tool in a couple of ways. One is bring your advisors, bring your management team, bring your team, bring your advisors, maybe even bring your end users, a few of the people that you're trying to affect, bring them to the conversation. Put yourself in a comfortable room with a lot of stickies and whiteboards and all these things, and whatever way you can do it. And do it very quickly. This is not a full day exercise. This is within a half hour, what comes out of this exercise? And see what comes out, you know? And take the data as it comes. Be vulnerable to what might come out of this. You might think you want to go in this direction, and you realize it's going to be this type of journey. Especially if you have the right people around the table with you, particularly the people that you're trying to affect.
One of the keys to a successful outcome of this exercise is diversity. If you have a homogeneous audience that's participating in this exercise, you will not extract the key insights that you need to have a successful, viable, scalable business. You need to have diversity of thought, and that means in terms of gender, age, education, backgrounds and experience, religion, all aspects. The more diverse, the better the insights, the more effective the organization is going to be, the better the chance of success that you are going to have once you go to market. Holt Prize, the Holt organization, university, I think says this really, really well. It's not about scaling your organization. It's not about adding more people to your team. It's about scaling the impact, right? Scale your concept, scale the impact, not the team. So look for ways to achieve better results, hopefully exponential results, through partnerships and through creative thinking. Just in terms of an additional tool here, and we will make these slides available to you, of course, with the exception of the business case that we presented here as an example. But there are a number of public domain tools that are out here that are available for you to begin the exploration of truth.
There's a question before we get to closing thoughts that came through. It was about, how do you separate, as a leader, how do you separate your time, manage your time between operational leadership and fundraising? Which is a very common question. How would you answer that, Scott?
Well, you can't raise funds, and by raising funds, I mean asking people for a commitment of their time or energy, investing in each capital, unless you have an idea of what the problem space looks like and what the potential universe of opportunities look like. And so understanding the problem is job one. Don't go raise capital until you're ready to have that informed conversation with the right audience, right? So since every business plan is going to be wrong, go out and seek the truth. And once you have evidence that supports a viable, scalable hypothesis, then and only then are you ready, truly prepared to go have that intelligent, informed conversation with prospective investors.
Yeah, and I would add you've got to do both. If you're a leader of such an organization, you have to do both. You have to operationally lead your organization, and you have to be raising money at the same time. And it will be a parallel path for the existence of your organization and your life there. And there's two reasons why. One is the practical reason of the lead time it takes to go through the due diligence process, to get to know the investor process, and get to funding events. That timeline is a long timeline. It doesn't just happen after a pitch. It takes months, 6 months sometimes, a year maybe. It will take some time. So you start right away. The second reason why you might consider this as overlapping lines is those people that you're talking to, the investor, are effectively your advisors. They don't know they're your advisors, but they are your advisors because everything they say, all criticism that they have, the way they think about this problem, what they know about the space you are about to walk into or trying to move forward into, that is knowledge you just want to take in. And just like you would want to talk to your advisors about this situation, that situation, soak up as much as you can. You want to talk about the ecosystem and talk about systems of movement. As a leader, you have to engage with these types of people that can really help you move this thing forward. And so the investor base is just one example of it's a population within the ecosystem. It's one group. Or go-to-market partners, just like governments, just like everybody else. The more you have connectivity, the more they're on text back and forth with you, the better that your relationship will be with those investors. And to create those relationships and to learn from their criticism or their feedback to you, that's a very important part of being a successful leader in this process. This is your community. And who knows, you might end up being an investor someday. They're not too far apart. They're kind of the same types of people. Two different objectives, two different paths, but they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to impact the same thing you're trying to impact. So you have to do both at the same time. Is there another question, or should we start wrapping up? Good. Okay, yeah. So let's wrap up. So closing thoughts?
Yeah. First, thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas today. We want to make certain that we continue the conversation. You can reach us through NEST. We're happy to provide guidance through NEST to you. When I think about being an entrepreneur and trying to go on this, for me, it's a question of just, can we embrace the fact that we don't have all the answers? And can we be vulnerable and recognize that it's more important to have the right questions because that will lead us to the truth. So be humble, be fearless, and be a truth seeker. If you have those ingredients, you have the foundation for being a successful social entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's very well put. I'd say thank you for the opportunity to give some thoughts that Scott and I put together. The reason why I'm very excited about a lot of what NEST is doing and what the community is out there and everybody that's tuning in today and everybody here in the room and also Accenture is, look, we are all trying to attack big problems. We all are. Some take a very commercial kind of mindset about trying to move the needle somewhere in a business. Some take the personal journey of what they want other people not to go through, and so they want to change the world in a certain way. But the systems here are such that all of us are entrepreneurs. We are the supply side of innovation. Everybody. It's because we have the human creativity. The fact that we can bring human creativity, whether through technology or whether through a business idea or whether through art or other creative exercises, we're here to express that. And we are creating systems in this world today that can impact the demand side, the part that needs those innovations, the part that needs those creative outputs that we can all create to solve big problems in the world. And that bridge is the honor that we have in terms of our Accenture Ventures program and open innovation to try to figure out what are those systems that bring it together to actually move the needle. And it sounds like a really nice thing to say. It is a nice thing to say. But here's the observation. When we talk to our biggest clients, big banks, governments, large corporations that do certain things, it used to be that they put the CSR activity in a box, right? The corporate social good activities over here. CEOs here, the board of directors, their C-level suite, and then they have the CSR thing over here. Let's do a foundation, let's donate, let's do some nonprofit stuff. Used to be that way. What's quickly happening is that agenda that the CSR has is squarely right in the middle of the economic commercial mind of the corporations, because the big problems in the world are starting to affect the profit and losses of the companies that we're helping. Refugee crisis in Europe is affecting telcos, it's affecting banks, it's affecting retailers. Not just negatively, but there's a huge opportunity for these corporates to do something in that world. For them to do that in the case of refugee issue, you have to understand the refugee issue. You have to add value to the situation. You have to find a synergy. You have to create the interdependence. Systems and corporations, they realize they have to do this to survive. Childhood diabetes, big issue in the United States. What does that mean? That means the parent has to take the kid to the doctor. The parent has to do this or that to help the child. That parent is not working for you when they're doing that. Loss of productivity. Right? So chronic disease is affecting the P&L of employers, large employers. And of course, we all know about the healthcare in the United States, that issue. Climate change. In Australia, the climate is changing to the point that farmers are going out of business faster than they ever had before, because the drought conditions in Australia are pretty severe. That's a big part of the GDP of the government of Australia. That's a big risk for the largest bank in Australia when they give a loan to a farmer and that farmer is not able to pay back that loan. It's a problem. It's a problem now for the CEO of that bank. And it's a problem for the government because from a GDP perspective, you're importing more than you had exported. In case of agriculture, they're still exporting more. And the other opportunity is, because of climate shift, Tasmania and the southern part of Australia is getting to a temperate conditions where you can grow wine better, more effective, more tasty wine, I don't know. That's a business opportunity. The government and the banks want people to set up wineries in Tasmania and the southern part of Australia to help with the GDP. It's a booming industry in South Australia. Why is that important? It's important to the bank because that's where they're going to make their money. It's important to the government of Australia because this shift in climate is going to affect the GDP. And lastly, I'll say, if you look at the role of artificial intelligence impacting jobs, people losing their jobs because of things being automated, every industry that we're playing in, we see that up front. In fact, we have a strong artificial intelligence practice within Accenture to go do those things, to make things more efficient, to help our companies create more productive outputs. But obviously what happens is people's jobs are being displaced. That's another social issue. You can imagine the thousands of social entrepreneurs that are trying to solve this problem. Well, guess what? It's a problem for our corporations as well. While they're gaining opportunity through efficiencies, the corporations and governments are saying, I have a social problem. The social problem is I have people without a job now. But if you look at it as it's a creation of human capital, you have people that are skilled in certain things, that are human beings, that are creative and that can go do something else. If you put the glass half full filter on this, big things can happen. So the point is, the CSR world, the social good world, and the corporate world are coming together very, very rapidly right now. And everybody on the call that dialed in today are part of that bigger systemic change. At the local level, national level, international level, it doesn't matter. We're all in the same place. And so it's a privilege for us to just be one of the people that are involved and try to help make these systems come together.
Right. you're the tip of the spear out there. You're the people on the front line making it happen.
Great.
So let's work together.
Let's work together. Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was an amazing session. So we were going to take a break, but I think we're just going to keep pushing through, and we're going to finish off the session with our third segment, which is deal negotiation for entrepreneurs. Our senior MD,
No, I'm just not
Kirti.
senior MD, no, I'm just MD.
Kirti is going to give a session on deal negotiation, and thank you very much, Kirti.
Sure, you want to do this slide now?
Oh, actually, yes. Give me one moment while I bring up.
Video as well. Do you think you could run the video?
Yeah.
This is the latest one, right? Final.
Yeah. Second.
Shanti. Okay, ready to go? Start sharing here.
So this is.
Oh, it's start sharing. Yeah. This is forward, backward.
We are now sharing.
What do I need to do here? No, it is like that. It is like that. Because you're in the room, you can't look at it. Okay, we can go now.
Okay, we're ready to go.
Okay. No, it's okay. We're fine. We're fine. We're totally fine. Hello. They can all see us. They can hear us. Excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kirti Vallure. I'm an MD, Managing Director with Accenture. Been with Accenture for about 12 years now. What I tell my people is when they ask about my experience, I say I've worked in Taiwan, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, India, UK, and the US. I missed out on going to Japan. I learned Japanese. I have a visa for Japan. I have a visa for Australia. Those are two countries I've not visited, and of course South America. Beautiful place. That's the next one I'm trying to be get there someday. That's my experience, and then I'm the sponsor from Accenture for NEST. So I've worked closely with Loic and Chrissy before yourself to make sure we get here and also be able to support budding entrepreneurs like yourself. Right. So that's my role in the firm. Shanti.
Yep. Shanti Ramurthy. I've been with Accenture for about 13 years now, and I've not worked across as many countries as Kirti has. He's showing off. But then I've worked with a number of clients across in different geographies, from different backgrounds, different technologies, and I'd like to believe that I'm something like a mini entrepreneur within the safe Accenture umbrella. So I worked with a number of clients as they adopt new technologies, and I've been pretty much in the emerging technologies area. So we work in terms of doing things that we've never done before, along with clients, and also bringing some of the best of Accenture thinking in the cutting edge world to our clients so that they can explore and experiment and see the value based on what we've done for other clients. So for me, this is, I hope I can connect to you with some of the things that we learn, even under the large umbrella of Accenture. There are things that I think we have a lot in common when we talk about clients and negotiation and what's, how do you make it successful for them?
Excellent. So the material that we have here, you want to go to the material? The material we have here is very light compared to the previous sessions. We're trying to make it very interactive. I've at least tried to make it more funny. So let's see how it goes, right? So we're talking about deal negotiation. You might ask, what's deal negotiation, right? I mean, we work in the technology industry, like Shanti said. It's not very different from what we have on the ground, right? If you're a fisherman trying to sell fish, if you're a moss collector, and you dry the moss and you're a producer and you design it and manufacture, how do you sell the moss? Right? It's all same. The intricacies might be different, fine tuning here and there, but then at the end of the day, deal negotiation is deal negotiation. You got a buyer, you got a seller, and you've got people in the middle who want to screw things up for you, right? How do you overcome all of that and then get across and make sure that the buyer and the seller meet and then are able to communicate and then get to a win-win situation, right? So we'll throw in a few examples, our experience, some do's and don'ts, and then I'll be more than glad to get some feedback and some questions as well, right? So like I said, I try to make it funny. Some images in here. You take deal negotiation. The first image is there's always the buyer and seller trying to fight. There's always a fight in the mind. There's a conflict between the two parties. We're always trying to see who's going to win, right? Our perspective, my perspective at least, is if you get into that kind of situation, nobody is a winner, right? There'll always be somebody who's going to walk away as a sole loser. So that's not a good example of an outcome of a deal negotiation, right? A deal negotiation might look like that, but the outcome should not be perceived from the result of that negotiation. The second image is two kids fighting over a small teddy bear. Again, something similar. People are fighting over a common goal. They want to get to an outcome. Not a good example again, right? The third one is, both of them are saying the same thing, different languages. We all know this. In South America, you've got multiple languages. We work across multiple clients around the world. We all say the same thing. We all want to get to the same outcome, but then again, different languages, right? Cultural barriers also come into play. The next one is a classic example of a wedding. You've got so many players in that image. There's been so many cases where I have been at deal negotiations. We're making a pitch to the client. There is one person in the room who's talking, who's most engaged. You walk away thinking that you won, you scored the deal, but then it's always the person who's not engaged, who's sitting in the back of the room, who's the one who's a decision maker, right? You got to quickly find out who is that person who's gonna tilt and who's gonna make the decision to make sure that you get to that person, right? And then of course next is clear, expectation mismatch between what you think is the worth of your product versus what the market is expecting. You're saying 65,000, the other person might say it's 10 million. You got to get to a common ground, right? There are a lot of things that must have gone wrong if you're so way off. So you've got to figure out how do you get to the common ground, right? And then of course the last one is both parties think, what's in it for me, right? What do I get out of this negotiation? What do I get out of our marriage, so to speak, that we're going to get into, right? I've also, with the help of Roberto, why don't you come over here? With the help of Roberto, I've also added some Spanish in all of the slides. You've done the proofreading. I have asked you the deliver as well during our session.
Yep, absolutely. So you're talking about
the last one, yeah.
Ya, la negociación consiste en obtener el mejor trato posible de la mejor manera posible.
Make sense? Okay. Okay. So there's one point I wanted to mention was deal negotiation. It's in my mind is an art and a science, right? There's so many people who've never gone to grad school, never gone through education, but then they're one of the best negotiators out there. And you could still have gone through a master's degree, done a PhD, and you could still be struggling with deal negotiation. So my view is the way we've set up these slides is we've taken what Accenture has from a science standpoint, and we've come up with our recommendations on what should you look out for. What are the steps in a deal negotiation? So it's a combination of a science and an art, and we've tried to make the best of it, right? Okay, interest, right? My view on this topic at least is that we've got to make sure that both the parties are clearly interested. There's a common interest, right? There should be a situation where you walk in another person has something else in their mind, right? You're trying to sell, there have been cases where when we walked in, we want to sell a particular software, we want to sell a certain product, but they've already made up their mind. They don't want to buy from us. It could be because of various reasons. So they make us go through the grind of presenting to us, presenting to them. We prepare, we spend multiple days and weeks in presenting, preparing for the presentation, and then finally we realize that they've already made up their mind, or they want to go with a different vendor, or they don't have the budget, but they still are going through the process, or they already have an existing incumbent provider who's going to do the work for them, right? So it's very important for you to figure out, get the goals and objectives aligned between both the parties that, hey, I'm here to sell you XYZ, right? This is what I plan to sell. These are my strengths. These are my capabilities. I want to make sure that you are the one who's going to make the decision. You are the buyer, and here's what you're interested in buying from us, right? I've seen that from my experience. It's very important to upfront make that agreement between both the parties, right?
And I can give an example of the worst case scenario. What do you do when you realize that you walked into a vendor evaluation or a proposal kind of context, and you know that nobody in the room is interested? So one of the things that we think of is from a long-term perspective, what do you have to do in this occasion that you will be the top of mind recall for the client, even if you lose the deal at this stage? So there have been scenarios where I've gone to, say, a one-day visit to Sweden because we were presenting to a large manufacturing client. I walked in, we saw the response, we immediately said, they've made up their mind, and we could see it on everybody's face. So it was a 2-hour presentation. We're going on and on and on and on. So then the person who was the anchor said, pause, let's take a 10 minutes break. And we regrouped and we said, the only message we want to convey is credentialize ourselves and say why we are good at what we do in our mind. And we said, that's it. Let's not focus on anything else. Let's look at what to leave as the top of mind recall for them. So we changed our presentation for the rest of the session to just say, here's my one key message for this topic. Here's my one key message for this topic. We walked away. Had a crisis. Several months later, guess whom they called? So, and this may not happen in every occasion, but there is a takeaway from every interaction. Even if you're in a losing spot, change, the negotiation is to then see what's the best I can leave you with at this point. And it might have a long-term benefit.
Are you showing off about Sweden?
I know. I was just waiting.
I've got this video, and I know I've tried to kind of keep it very, very simple, and there's an ad here. I'm going to skip the ad in 4 seconds. Can people hear the audio? You know? Okay, you don't need audio. This is a soccer game between two teams, and very important to make sure that there's common goals. The team and you can hear. You don't need audio for this. Yeah. It's a classic case of a self goal. You can see the video.
1 second.
It's okay. You know what? You can skip. That's okay. That's fine. That's fine.
You sure?
That's okay. Yeah.
All right.
That's okay.
Put it
You can copy paste the link on your.
1 second.
Oh, we can.
No, it's okay. Leave it. That's okay.
I'm trying to
This video is not important. There's one more coming up. I think there we'll spend some more time. So yeah. So back to common interest. Again, simple example. We all know they both had different priorities, different interests. That thing did not work out well, right? Again, I mean, I hate car salesmen. You know, whenever we walk in, I always have a feeling that I'm going to get screwed over. Bad example. So again, an example of something you should watch out for. Don't be a car salesman, or don't think you're dealing with a car salesman. Try to clarify upfront that it's not a car salesman, right? Next step is what options exist between both the parties, right? Figure out a meeting place. You need to upfront agree that, hey, I'm going to meet you at 5 p.m., 3 p.m., 2 p.m. Agree, figure out what that is, and make sure that you show up on time. My experience has always been that showing up early, about 15, 20 minutes before the meeting, figuring out where we are. First time when Loic and us met, Loic and team were there maybe 30 minutes before, sitting there, they already had a few cups of coffee, and then we were given the best coffee because they had already tasted all the coffee by then. We knew which one. So yeah, so any meeting, any critical negotiation, we always go ahead of time, scout the area also if required, find out which is the best spot in that area, and then make sure that we are prepared for the meeting, right? And during the discussion, very important for you to ask questions, right? Listen and communicate appropriately. There's so many times where two people are in a heated negotiation, and I've seen that we don't even wait for the other people to finish talking and be ready with our response, right? That's not good. There's lots of material on the internet about effective listening and effective speaking. I would urge all of us. I do this myself even before going in front of a critical sales pitch. I present to myself. I stand in front of a mirror. I take notes. I take notes like this. I make sure that I'm well prepared. My key points are all jotted down, so that I come across as being very polished. Right, very important. Do a lot of prep. Ask the right questions at the meeting. Wait for the other person to finish speaking, and then go ahead and then communicate. Right, and then of course take notes. So many times when your brain is processing, you think you heard 50,000. They said 5,000. You know where that's going to lead to, right? It's a big problem. So take notes, lots of notes.
Pound versus dollars.
Pound versus dollars, yes. They might speak in pesos. You might have US dollars in mind. You never know, right? Take lots of notes. Again, funny stuff. Okay, moving on. This is important, right? When you're selling a product, we as Accenture, when we sell a product, we try to do a market comparison of what is the worth of our product, what is the worth of our services in the market, right? So you as entrepreneurs, and when you're trying to promote and work with in your local community, you've got to understand what is the worth of your product, right? Can you, if it's getting sold for $10 today, can you command $12? Is your product worth $12, or because you're an entrepreneur, you're a small scale, industry, do you think you should go down for $8? That's something, that analysis you have to do upfront before you go into the negotiation, because there'll always be a case where the buyer might want to bring you down, bring your value down, bring your worth down, right? So do the analysis before you go into the meeting, and at that meeting, make sure to have data points with you where you show them that, hey, in that market, this product is worth X amount of dollars. It's sold for this. This is what it goes for. And in this market, this is what I'm commanding, right? Make sure to have those data points ready so that when you get into a conflict, which I hope you do not, but at least you have the data with you, and it comes across as you've done your research. Very important, right? There's always a fair price for every product, except I have an example here, which is a classic case of that product can command whatever price they want. I'll give you that example. And then of course you can use marketing tactics as well. We had the NESsT event here. We had small eggs, from NESsT, and beautiful stuff. Accenture does this as well. Employ marketing standards, and services as well to make sure that your product is known to the buyer, so it makes your life easier when you're about to sell, right? Again, on the right, you've got a bus with a snake on top. That's a classic marketing case for a zoo. Zoo is trying to encourage people to come to the zoo. Very impressive. Similarly, this is one that's very popular here. A cow promoting chicken. Again, we all laugh. It's funny, but then think about it. It's just so impactful. And then the final one that I spoke about, the market standard. This is a classic case, right? This is over the years. This is the cost of making an iPhone. This is what it costs Apple to make an iPhone. We all carry an iPhone, most of us. So if you have an iPhone 7 or a 6S, like I do, it costs Apple $1,100. But they sell that product for $800 to $900, right? So that's the worth, and nobody's going to compete. Nobody's going to dispute. There isn't a competing iPhone in the market. You've got Samsung. We know what happens with Samsung. What's been happening with Samsung. But then people like myself, yourself, all of us are willing to pay the $800.
I'm a Samsung fan.
Okay, you got to stay away from her. So people are willing to pay. So you could be in a situation where your product is very different from others. So don't hesitate to the previous discussion that we had and the question that came in from the previous session, can I ask for money, right? Can I ask for a fair price? Yes, I think you should ask for a fair price for which your product is worth, right? If you are creating something unique, if you put in the extra effort, make sure to do that, right? You've got to, the point being that you've got to do this research, this analysis before you get into the negotiation, right? Very important for you.
So just an example of, you're differentiated, but your clients do not have proven examples of your differentiation. What do? You have an iPhone or equivalent, like a very distinct solution for which you're asking a premium, but then the clients do not know why they should pay so much for a company that they've not worked with before, or tell me who else has seen this success. So that's part of your negotiation planning that you need to do. There are different ways. Either you have to, we do things like, industry analysts view us as being the thought leaders here. We may not have a client story to talk about, but here are some of the assets or offerings that we bring to the table. That's one approach we take. It may not be relevant for, say, a non-enterprise kind of a scenario, but you still need to find out how would you showcase what's the differentiation. Maybe it is an outcome that you can commit to. Maybe it is a pilot or a proof of concept that you can offer where you can show this is the difference, so that they can feel and experience it before they commit. So, and sometimes it is, you might have to give a huge discount to say, about, what we've done for you elsewhere, it'll help me and I will help you by giving you the best possible discount. So when you go to the negotiation table, be prepared to see why the client should trust you and what are the levers that you can pull for them to maybe be the first one who can help you and gain some, say, recognition on the back of it, or some industry visibility because of this particular initiative. So see what are the other levers you can take to the table as a negotiation technique. You may not walk away with the best margin in the first instance, but you may walk away with a credential from the client.
Yeah. This is again a classic. You need to know what your we call it back now in the firm, but it's basically what's your lowest, what's your best and final offer, right? BAFO, as we call it. You've got to know that before you go into the meeting. If my product, like if I go to the previous slide, we said Apple's product is $224. That's what it costs, right? Similarly, you got to know what your lowest floor is before you get into the negotiation discussion, because when you're negotiating with your customer and he says $10,000, he says $5,000, and then you know that your BAFO, best and final offer, or your BATNA is $3,000, you should know what that number is, because you should be willing to walk away from the deal because you've already hit the BATNA, you've already hit that lowest floor, right? Or to Shanti's point, you should be willing to give some concessions on top of your floor because you want a credential. You want a client, you want to be known for working with that particular customer or with that particular restaurant. You're willing to give that person some discounts for being associated with you, right?
What does BATNA stand for?
BATNA is best alternative to a negotiated agreement. It's on top of the slide. It's a very top.
Oh, it's cut off.
Okay, so it's BATNA. I've got that in Spanish as well. Very important for you to know. Otherwise, yeah. The other point being, typically when you reach a stage of BATNA, when you've reached that point, quite likely you might end up in conflict resolution, right? You will get into a conflict, and you've got to think about how do you resolve or ensure that you do not go down the path of conflict, right? And you've got to come up with ideas of conflict resolution as well. Very important again, because conflicts typically do not result in a win-win situation, right? Both parties walk away unhappy, right? There's so many cases in our industry where we've said we presented a rate card to the customer for different services. The customer said, I want 30% discount. We said, you know what, we can only do 15% discount. Below that does not make profitable sense for us, right? We've been very honest and open with the procurement teams to tell them that below this, my firm is not going to approve this deal, right? I can't go below 15%. When you're open, when you're transparent with them and share with them that, hey, this is the lowest I can go. Below this, I cannot do it for you. Sometimes the clients turn around, provided they value the worth of your services, they value the impact that you're going to bring to them, they might turn around, right? But try to avoid going down the final path of conflict. Okay. Then while you're going through the negotiations, make sure to clearly articulate what the next steps are, right? Once you got to a win-win situation, you've got to make sure that you, at that meeting, you document the terms of the agreement. What are we signing up for? What kind of payment terms there are? 30 days payment term, or monthly payment term, or quarterly, or whatever that is. Make sure to gain that agreement. That's why, going back to the earlier point, take notes. Take lots of notes. Get it all documented, and quite possibly right after the meeting, the way I do this at least is I send a quick email to my customer, clarifying that this is what we discussed. So there's no ambiguity before you go further up and get approval or start supplying goods and services to the customer. It's very clear that this is what you've agreed to, right? And if there's a legal requirement in your geography, get that legal requirement also done, right? In terms of contract. But before you leave the table, before you leave from the coffee bar, once you've reached an agreement, make sure to document everything, replay back to the customer or to the buyer that, hey, here's what we both have agreed on. Do you agree? And then you walk away from there, right? And of course, there's so many times, it's happened. I mean, culturally, right? I mean, there's some cultures where, when you want to say yeah, when you're agreeing, typically most people nod up and down, right? In some cultures, they nod this way, right? That's a classic example. You work with Japanese customers and clients, they would always nod all the way down, right? We've had so many cases where we think they're agreeing to what we're saying. In that culture, nod is basically that I've heard you. I've heard what you said. Acknowledge what you said. Does not mean that I agree what you said, right? So many cases where on a Monday, we have a very detailed discussion with the customer. They nod their head all the time. We think, hey, we won. They agreed to everything. And then we document an email and send it to them by the end of the day. They come back and say, no, we did not agree to anything. We just nodded. We just nodded that we heard you. We did not agree to you, right? So cultural differences exist. What you think is a yes may not be a yes in their culture. So make sure to document, quickly follow up with, with an email or a formal document, right?
Yeah, and just to say the importance of this, especially if you're in a situation where there are multiple people negotiating, they also have a strategy to work with us. And they have this, one person will be the good cop, one person will be the tough cop. They're also doing the same thing. So when you document, it's much easier to not go back to square one every time you come to the negotiation table. It helps to say, okay, we've made this progress. These are the things that we've discussed. These are the things we've committed. Let's move from here. It helps to keep the focus. And in many cases, are negotiators who want to get the best out of you. And there are many who are only looking at getting the work done, right? So if you talk after 3 months, you might think of it as, I committed this, and that person might think, I understood this, or their thinking has evolved in those 2-3 months. So unless you have something to go back to, it's hard to then win credibility. So it's not just being formal, but then the benefit of documenting helps in pretty much all scenarios, be it whether you're dealing with a large group or you're dealing with individuals, and you don't want to get into a scenario where I said this and then the person says, I don't remember. And these could be people who are honest and they really think that they didn't hear you say it. So it's always good to document.
Yeah, there is one aspect that I would like to add here is the unknowns.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there are situations where both the parties are not 100% clear exactly what is to be delivered.
Yes.
Those are the things that you have to leave it in the terms as assumptions where it is not validated. So it is not left to discussion at a later date telling that I told you and you didn't agree. That would not be discussion. At least it is documented that this is an unknown, and based on that, this contract is
Perfect. Yeah.
that may have impact
Totally.
Absolutely.
both at
Yeah,
time
so
and money.
Totally.
typically that's the construct of your contract, your commercial contract. So when you're at the negotiation table, if there are things that you think are sensitive, it's good to bring it up and have the conversation. And I have like one small example around that. When we work with certain clients in, say, a time and material kind of contract, just give me capacity, just give me smart people kind of deals, there is a difference because they think that when I'm taking people from Accenture, I will also get innovation, I will get the smartest people that come and tell me when I'm doing something wrong. If they see something that could go wrong, eventually they will call it out. Because they've worked with us in different contexts, they have the same mindset, irrespective of whether you're in a deal where it is outcome-based or if you're just giving people. So those kind of expectations, like you said, is extremely important to have some open dialogue and put it in the contract saying, here's what you'll get, and here are things that we think are out of scope in this particular contract. So yes, very good point.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a funny thing down there. If you can all see, is classic case. We don't know what the referee is saying, and looks like the referee is asking how many penalties would you like today, and they're saying 2, right? Which is so communication is important, right? Okay.
Okay, so I know a lot of negotiation trainings are out there. My one point is, and we do this internally as well, there is some part of it which comes naturally to many people. They are very good negotiators, but for most of the others, you need to be trained. And depending on your role, the client, the geography you're operating, the nature of the work, the styles vary, right? So it is a constant learning as well when it comes to negotiation. Do not believe that you know how to do it. It keeps changing. So I wanted to say that think of what's your negotiation style and see how to constantly improvise on that. If I looked at what are the 3 things that I need to keep in mind, and my style of approaching this keeps changing as well. And so if I were to articulate today in my current role, what's my negotiation style? For me, 3 things are important. One is, if you're in a client context for a long time, you're too much in the details. You know them, you know what's driving some of the things. And when you go to the negotiation table, you could try to solve a lot of things because you have the context, right? So for me, the first thing that I try to plan for or prepare for is to make sure that you're focusing on the client with whom you're negotiating. And a recent example, we're trying to close a transformation program with a client. At the same time, we're selling a small deal on the side, which is like a small, painful application to be migrated out. This is not strategic for them. It's troublesome. They've tried it twice, it's failed. Now, the large transformation program is make or break for certain people within the client's organization. We want to be doing both of these. Now, when we're doing this and we're having conversations and we're negotiating the small deal while having discussions with a large deal, the small deal, we have to go prepared with whom am I talking to today and what is the one thing that is important for that individual. Then the next stage is who's the sponsor for that? What is the one thing that is important for that individual? Now, who is the person in procurement who is trying to get the best deal out of this contract, and between vendors they're discussing. So each player has a different objective. One wants to get the best pricing. One wants to make sure that for the 3rd time I'm attempting this, I better get the right partner who will make it successful. And the second person is time. This is my project. I have to deliver this. I don't have too much time. I need to close this quickly. So being prepared for what is the one thing that is important for with whom you're working. Now, you have to also realize who's the decision maker, right? One is an influencer, one is just contributing to the process. Like the procurement team is not the decision maker, but unless you pass the gate, you don't get anywhere. So understand who is playing what role on the client side, and as much as possible, try to get information about what's their budget, what's their funding. You may not have access to these things, but sometimes they will tell you that you're twice as high, I cannot do this. There are clients who are willing to share some information as well with whatever is allowed for them. So try and understand as much as you can and then be relevant to that individual and what is the motivation. So for me, when I prepare, it is one of things that I need to accomplish and make sure that this risk is not coming up. We've dealt with this team before and they have all these issues and all of that is in the background. But narrow it down to who am I talking to, what's the one thing. So that's the first part. The second most important part is when you're at the negotiation table, you're having the tough conversations around money, 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 very, very, very often, right? That's finally the final stage. But when you have to close a negotiation, it's mostly not about the money part. That is one part of it, but there is always a driver behind what they're, talking at the table. Sometimes it is they have to go back and tell their organization that I've got the best price. Sometimes they have to say I've picked the right vendor who will give me the best price and has the ability to deliver, right? And sometimes they have to look tough and say that I'm a tough negotiator. And so I will push you till I see where you cannot, go beyond. And unless they see that you've reached you're against the wall and you'll walk away, they will not stop.
Baffle.
That's, yeah. So you have to understand what's their motivation, or what is it that they're looking beyond that price point that they want to get to, and make sure that you're addressing some of those things as well. And there are different things that you can do. You could probably offer to do some upfront work, like a proof of concept or whatever. Or in our case, we try and do, you give some credit, saying if you give follow-on work, then I can give you different types of discounts. So there are different deal constructs that you can try if you know them today. And in some cases, I remember one scenario where we were working for almost 2.5 months with a client, going back and forth on negotiation. And ultimately, the key decision maker, who was the budget sponsor, said, you know what, I need to close this quarter, but I can make the payment only in the next quarter. And so this is like delaying tactics till you get to the point where you select the vendor, but then you just wait for that 2 more weeks, then you can sign it. So this whole time you're going back and forth on that without understanding that no matter what you do, they'll take that decision only on that, particular last week or whatever. So we said, okay, we get it. We don't mind. We don't have to close the deal this quarter. We can wait for you to sign the contract or whatever and make the payment in the future quarters. These are the flexibilities we can offer you. That's it. But we never knew, and we went on for nearly 2 months. So some of these things are hard to get to, but you'll have to try and see how much you can understand behind the dollar value that they're trying to negotiate with you. The last one is, it's not about me, it's about winning the deal, right? Making it a win-win for the client. And very often, and again, this is my example. So very often I like to feel I've closed the deal, right? And so I need to consciously check. That's the most important thing, to be seen as, oh, she went and closed this deal, or is there a better way to close the deal by doing some role plays? There are times when I've asked my lead to go and say, you have the first round of conversation. I'll step in and say, here is the best we can do. Or sometimes I go do the conversations with different stakeholders. And then when we come to the discussion where we know this is our BAF, we cannot go any further, we have to back up. Then I get my boss and say, this is it, this is all I can do. Here's my boss, he's coming and he's giving you this final offer. Will it work? It looks like I was not efficient in closing the deal and my boss had to step in. It's okay. It's actually okay, because you're ultimately trying to win the work. And so sometimes there is, and it's extremely hard, and especially it depends on who you are, if you're incentivized because you closed a deal. There might be different constructs within your organization, or you might be the only person who can negotiate. Everyone else in your team is very junior. So you might have to coach them and say, you have the first conversation, and then I'll come and close the deal. You'll have to look for ways to do role play, because very often when you're in the negotiation table, you could have laid out all options. But that one other voice coming and saying the same option might open doors, because it becomes like a yes, no conflict. And then no matter what you give after that, they're not open to listening. So we have a specific training, and I want to sort of wrap up with that, but we were trained on something called the push versus pull technique. What it means is when you're saying, I can do this for you, you're constantly going and telling the other person, this is what I can bring to the table. It's considered as push. Their brain goes, yes, no, right? So to break that pattern, if you say, what do you think, then you're giving them an option to express how they feel with that option. So every time you tell someone, here is what I can do, end it with, what do you think? Seek feedback in that at the end of that sentence. So it's from the push, it becomes a pull technique. And then the second part is generally go with at least 3 options, because when you go with 2 options, it's sort of a binary yes, no, and then the discussion is locked, and it is hard for the other person to go back and say, I've reconsidered this option. So it is always good to have at least 3 options, and psychologically they say the third option is the best option of conversation, whether it is with your child, your spouse, or with a client. Have 3 options. The first 2 are the not so great ones. Third one is the win-win for both. So when you're preparing for negotiations, it's perfectly fine to actually write it down and go in a specific sequence, because that helps close some of these discussions. And the last point is trust. At a negotiation table, you have to leave the other person with a feeling of trust. And so if this is not working for you, you need to walk away at some time. It is better to let go of a deal than to do a bad job later on. So understand what is it that can build the trust. It could be someone who credentializes you, some other client who can talk on your behalf, or it could be something where you bring someone else and say, yes, this is the rock bottom. Now talk to somebody else who can give you some more options, so that the other person's trust that you are thinking in their best interest as you're trying to promote your purpose is sort of intact. You have to be consistent. You have to be trustworthy for them at a negotiation table to really, really close the deal. So that's sort of my experience. Happy to take questions.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. The last slide, again, the consolidation of all the stuff that we discussed. Just these are some of our tips. We've had them in Spanish as well out there, just in case if it's not clear. But first one, of course, is make sure that you come across as being genuine, right? You've got to be legitimate, right? You got to make sure that you are selling. You claim what you're saying. You got to stand behind your claim. Product is going to do this. You got to make sure that you know your product, you know what it does, and you're selling the product. Very important for you. You got to have confidence in the way you come about. You cannot be, you cannot come across as your confidence comes when you know what you're selling. When you know so the first point builds on the second point builds on the first point, right? Each of them are interrelated. Same car dealer example. You reached a deadlock. Both of you, you're not able to negotiate, and then he goes and gets somebody else, and that person may be as dumb or as crooked as the previous person, the sales guy, but then he comes across as being more authoritative, more confident, and that way and he throws in a few things for you, or maybe throws nothing for you and says that just plays back exactly what the previous car salesman, the junior guy, did with you, and you still get convinced, right? Classic. Again, going back to a point of role play, and make sure that one person at least in that role play is super confident, and it's got to be the authority guy, somebody who can say that this is it, this is the best and final offer, and when you do that, you should be ready to walk away from the deal, right? Be courteous, understand their pains, understand their problems as well, but my view on this point is don't completely bend down. Sometimes when you bend, bow, twist and turn, you might end up losing the deal. You might end up giving them too much concessions than you prepared for. That's why you should remember that you should know what your BATNA is in the first place. You can't go below your BATNA. Have that written down somewhere or put that in your mind so that you don't go below those concessions, right? I'll skip the next one, but most important thing is rapport. Make sure that you build a rapport with the other person. We heard start texting them, be in communications with them. Very important for you to also get to know know whom you're selling to. In Accenture, at least, we have seen in our experience, I would say about close to about 60% to 70% of deals happen not through a new RFP kind of situation, right? You get to know the customer, you build a relationship with them, and then that's how deals come through, right? And once the deals come through, they stick with us because we build good relations, we do good work for them. Of the Fortune 100 companies, this is something we pitched, something I spoke on Thursday as well. Of Fortune 100 companies, 94 of them have been our customers for 10 years, more than 10 years. That's because we've sold our services, but then we continue to build relations with them, and they like us after that. Right? We spoke about the incentives and trade-offs. Know what your BATNA is, know what incentives you can throw in, what are the trade-offs you can do, and don't go over the committed number. Don't go beyond the plan, what you come to a meeting with, right? And of course, research. Understand what you're selling, understand where he's coming from, what is his market, what's a fair value for your product, and make sure to stay within those boundaries, right? And then, of course, you will get into conflict. Make sure that you have an out. Make sure that you're very clear about what you come here to achieve. You're not come there to achieve or to get into a fight, to get into a war with them. Win or lose, it ought to be win and win. Because if it's a win and lose, 3 months later he'll cancel your contract. If he wins and you lose, then you'll be running losses as well. Win-win is the only situation out, right? So, any questions? I think we've reached the end. Any questions?
I don't think we have questions.
Everybody sounds.
Yeah. What are the some difficulties you face when preparing for deals?
For deal negotiation.
My experience preparing for deal negotiation is understanding the motive. First of all, is understanding who the buyer is, who's the decision maker. Right? You walk into a room, there are 5 people, or you go to a lunch meeting, or you meet in a cafeteria. There are 3 people from the other side. Who is the person who's going to make a decision? Right? In my experience, it's typically not the person who's talking the most. It's always the person who's the quietest. Right? That's been my experience. It's the person who's the quietest, who's taking notes, who's making mental notes as well, who's trying to figure you out, and who has all the data facts. He's the one who's going to make the decision. So in our role play, if there are 3 people, we try to go with at least 3 people from our side as well, so that we try to pair off, right? We try to pair off and say, you cover Andy, I'll cover Steve, and she will cover Julie, for example, right? That's the role play we do. So that way, we make sure that everybody is covered. We don't let anybody feeling that they're not taken care of, or we've not covered them completely, right? Very important for you. So that finding out who your main buyer or decision maker is very important, and understanding the social styles as well. She spoke about it at some point in time. You can Google up social styles. There's a lot of research on social styles. Some people like to be pushed. Some people like to be pulled. To her point earlier, some people like to be sold to. Some people don't like to be sold to. There's lots of do's and don'ts. It's a full day session for us in Accenture. Unfortunately, I can't cover that. So understand what their social styles are. That way you can, in your role play, you can also align those kind of people with them, right? The perfect mapping happens. And the third thing is do your research. These are 3 things that I feel are most important when you go into a negotiation, right? And as part of your research, you should know what your BATNA is. What's your walkaway point? So that you don't feel sad that you lost the deal because you tried hard, you reached the floor. Below the floor, there's no way you can go any further because it'll be a loss for you, right?
2 examples that I want to give. The question was, what challenges do we face? Working in the emerging technology space, there are 2 scenarios. One where all of them among your competitors, everybody is good, right? So when the client is assessing vendors, everybody has an offering, everybody is good at what you're doing, then what? That is one scenario where it's very hard to differentiate yourself, right? If it is price, they can also give a fantastic price. If it is industry assets and offerings and thought leadership, they're also there, we're also there. So that's one scenario that, and I'll talk about how we address that, but that's one scenario. When all the competitors are more or less equal for the client. The second scenario is when there's no proven example, right? Especially if you're talking about now blockchain, you want to implement blockchain. There's no clear big credential that some of us can take to a client for their industry. So these 2 scenarios are very common that we see, and it probably will resonate with you as well, especially if you have an innovative solution. Why should the client trust you? That you have to plan for. or you can do it, so can someone else, so can someone else, so can someone else, right? So in these scenarios, we never talk. Let me take the first example. When everybody is similar, we don't talk about why we are the best. We credential ourselves very quickly, talk about who are the other clients who can talk to you, pick up the phone and talk to you about what we've done for them. So you quickly leave them with that message. But you focus more on how can I solve this problem for you, and how are we approaching the problem, demonstrate how you've understood what their needs are, you understand what their pain points are, and what you want to solve first versus next. So it's like completely shift the focus on solution, because then it's a much more productive conversation, because there's no other thing to sort of spend time on. So it's like make the most of the time to build confidence in what you're bringing to the table as a solution. So that's one approach. When you talk about the second scenario where there's no proven example, in that case, we are more, we're focusing more on how to partner. What's the skin in the game for us when we try to close this thing? So can we offer to do something together where we try and take some of the risk along with the client, without, of course, paying for it and losing the, taking the whole burden if it fails. That's not the idea. But come up with a model where can you break it down? Instead of the entire implementation, can we start small? Can we pilot it somewhere? Can you pay us for the pilot and then we go beyond? Can we jointly learn with you? Are we willing to invest upfront? And we do some of these things. With one of our clients, we are working on an artificial intelligence use case. We said, we've done this for many clients. The machine learning concept is an iterative thing. So we bring what we've learned in 3 or 4 other client scenarios to the table, right? And you tell us what use cases you're working on, and we'll jointly implement. You're learning, we are learning. So the whole construct of that deal was set up by saying, there is not enough proven example of getting it right in the first instance, right? So we'll tell you what we've learned. We'll share our challenges with you. That's the value we'll bring to the table. It was not the money part. It was the experience part, which is way more useful for them, because they don't have teams that can go and talk to 5 other clients. We have teams that can talk to 15 other client teams and bring the experience to the table. That was far more valuable than what another competitor could have given to them, right? So sometimes you have to just look at how else you can approach the negotiation table with these kind of levers.
Yeah, but considering, say, an entrepreneur,
yeah,
or a new entrant into an industry,
yes,
right? They would have challenged that I have absolutely no platform.
Yeah.
I do not have even a datum to stand.
No benchmark.
No benchmark.
No benchmark.
So how do I sell myself, right?
Yeah.
So that is where the negotiation becomes very difficult. It is almost like if the client is very demanding, he would force you to negotiate with yourself. Tell me what is the best and final offer. Typically, that is where understanding the client becomes very critical. And before the client comes and asks you the question that what is the cheapest or what is the best you can do for me, understand from the client by seeking that information, that what will make you successful. My solution, my product, or my services, these are the things that I can offer you. But what eventually my product or services can help you be successful. And what are those parameters of measurement? What are the 3-4 things that you would measure as your success?
Exactly. So
and
this is
try to build in so that you are not forced to negotiate with yourself that, okay, I actually quoted $100,000. The client says, you know what, I cannot pay you $100,000. Then you have to come back and say, you know what, I will sell you at $95,000. That is negotiating with yourself.
true.
Before you get to that situation, you should be able to understand, and your $100,000, you should be able to articulate through the value that you are offering, so that you are not forced to negotiate with yourself. The client should be able to quote saying that I get all the values, I am happy. However, my budget doesn't allow it. That is where you have to do the trade-offs and incentives that we are talking about.
And also you might have to, and this is the point where make them focus on the solution and the value. And then when you think of the price point, you might have to find creative ways to break it up and say,
Right.
40,000, this is the outcome. Let's do a checkpoint there, and then we work for the next 50K.
Yeah, that is financial
Yes,
engineering.
yeah, yeah.
You can split it in multi-phases
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Excellent. I think we're at the top of the hour.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Shanti.
Thank
Short
you.
notice for being here.
No, this is very exciting. There's
I
always
know you have
something to
busy
learn.
Saturday always, but
I know now. He's taking advantage of
can
the
I
situation.
get the Accenture team here just to show your face, let them know who was the team that was working behind the scenes. Volunteers, please. Come on over.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Accenture.
Should we get in the frame of the camera?
We can
Tighter?
we will all squeeze in once we get everybody. So. I'm sure you can all. I don't know if you can all see us, but then this is the Accenture team in the room. The other presenters have left. All of you, Roberto. This could not have happened without you. You're the
And the
man.
translations.
You're the muscle. So he's the muscle behind the entire event itself.
He's the
And,
program head.
He's the program lead, and he gladly accepted the opportunity, and it's been amazing. Super, thank you very much. Both of us stayed in the background and let him drive things. Thank you for being here short notice, and thanks for being. I hope the session was informative, was useful.
Yeah, definitely.
Really appreciate your help for being here. And next team, Simone.
Yes,
Thank you.
Simone, you should come up to the screen. Say hi, everyone. Hi, this is Natalie, Simone.
Hi.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we have our other NESsT.
Big guy.
Big guy
Lee.
from NESsT, yeah.
Well, it was
Hi.
great. Thank you so much for joining us. This video will be recorded so you can share with any other entrepreneurs that you think can gain this
And
valuable
I hope
advice.
the session was useful. We picked 3 topics, knowing that they might have an impact on you. But like you said, we got tons of material. We got tons of speakers who do these things for a living. We can go get other topics as well. We can every 6 months we can conduct a session like this. So open to ideas. Feel free to channel them through the NESsT team,
Yes.
and we would like to know more.
Great.
Thank
If
you
there are any
so much
offline
to
questions,
Accenture. Yeah.
if there are any offline questions, we will be happy to respond through NEST.
Perfect. With this, we sign off. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.